and actually meeting we're doing the car design as well. So I'm meeting the client here. So
yes. Okay, we're live on streaming services. Seems like we're going.
We're good?
I think so. We got a notification.
Yeah, we're good.
Hey, what was it? Was I doing it wrong?
I mean, it sounded like you were doing it right.
Hi, guys.
Hello. Okay, it's Tony. No Tony yet.
I think Tony he's a little bit delayed. He's arriving, so so you guys can get started.
He's in traffic.
He's flying in.
Oh, he's flying in.
Traffic to Zoom from the kitchen to the living room.
Yeah.
I see Steven there. Hi, Steven. Thanks
Hello.
for joining. Hi, Graham. Thanks for joining us. So I think that you guys can begin. Ramiro.
Okay, great. So hi everyone. We're joined so far by Stephen Ma, Sayar Kalam, and Principal Exuberance, right? Yeah. And then we're also joined by Graham Harman, Liberal Arts Chair. And you guys know who goes first, right?
Yeah, I'm going first.
Was Christina? Yeah, okay. You want to, so I think everyone's just going to take over the screen and present how they want to present.
Yep. Okay. I'll go ahead and get started. Give me 1 second. Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Christina Griggs, and the working title of my thesis is Common Thread. So my project is a design for the Smithsonian American Women's History Museum. The project so far it has passed the House, but it has yet to pass the Senate, so it's still in really preliminary stages. They've proposed a couple sites for it to be on. So I've been looking at, you can see here, site labeled 1, which is directly across from the African American Museum on the National Mall. So the African American Museum has been a project that I've been looking at. It has a really similar program breakdown. And so in thinking about these kinds of museums, I really ran into the thought that when you create a museum like the Women's History Museum or the African American Museum, basically there's an idea that there is history and then there is women's history, or there's African American history, and they're a kind of secondary relationship to the dominant narrative. And this ties into some of the feminist literature that I had been reading by Simone de Beauvoir, talking about men being posited as the subject and women as the other. So in creating an American Women's History Museum, there's a question of how to break down that hierarchy. And so I've also been looking at some of the women's gallery and institutional spaces. The major precedent for my project would be the 1893 Chicago Columbian Exposition project. It was designed by the first female architect who graduated from MIT. It was basically a giant showcase for women's art and crafts. This actually then served as the precedent for the 1972 project Woman House by Miriam Shapiro and Judy Chicago, which was both a kind of gallery space where each room had like kind of an installation of like different feminist work, but also it was a kind of performance space. So it was interested in breaking down the ideas of the typical gallery wall and had a kind of idea about domestic space and the performance that happens with that. So then when it comes to architecture, I saw a kind of parallel in this hierarchical between the kind of relationship between the History Museum and the Women's History Museum, between men and women, and between architecture and interior design, where interior design has been given a kind of secondary status to the architecture, and a lot of times it's been gendered in that way too. There's an idea of like the feminine curtain, which is blocking the kind of masculine vision of the architecture. So I've been looking at these kinds of typical or traditional women's techniques, wallpaper, curtain, and then the question became kind of how to liberate it from the architecture, so to break down the hierarchies and have it somehow stand alone. So that leads to, you can see that it's slow on the, there we go. I started doing these fabric formal studies, these are all digital studies looking at the kind of different physics of different fabrics and how they could be sewn together in order to create their own massing. Which leads to the miniature. I then 3D printed one of the forms to kind of take a closer look at the physical quality of some of the folds and pleats. And then I moved into creating different massings and different formal compositions in order to see how they could look together. Which then leads back to the project. So this is looking at a rendering of the project on the site, looking towards the Washington Monument. The larger volume, I'm imagining holding most of the history galleries, which is the largest programmatic element, and the smaller volume holding both community and gallery spaces, something that's more participatory, and the purple volume in the middle acting as kind of connective tissue. And then this is a view from the Washington Monument back towards the project. So for the midterm, I went back to making a physical model to re-examine the physical qualities of the form. I also took the opportunity of the midterm model to make it a mixed material model. So not only PLA prints, but also resin prints and fabric itself. Here from the back, you can see how the pleats are working with the fabric. So to test out the techniques, because the kind of interior design techniques are moving beyond just the exterior, the question of my project is also really how do we use these elements in order to set off the gallery. I have an interest in both elevating the techniques and the craft of these female techniques to a kind of institutional level, like we're raising what wallpaper is, but also domesticating the museum. I wanted to look at kind of at this seminal work of, in 1972, Judy Chicago. It's like one of the big feminist art pieces, which is this, it's a large table, which has 39 place settings for women throughout history. And this project itself was interested in raising our value of craft techniques. It's ceramic, it's embroidery, a lot of stuff, which especially in 1972 wasn't taken seriously in the art world. But again, it's 1972, so in many ways the project is dated, and there's many things that it's missing. So I've been looking at a kind of chunk of the building in order to start to postulate how it could be used. So you'll see the dinner party there is in the middle. The project also had a number of historical information, which would be on the ground level. And then this large tapestry includes something like over 500 photos I have of women who are not seated at the table. And it's not fully fleshed out yet, but that's something that I'm continuing to working on, is to use the gallery space to fill in the gaps from the table. So this is looking at a little bit of the facade, so you can see how it's kind of looking at a pleat, which would maybe be a fabric operation, and how it's kind of a reimagining of, a sawtooth kind of on its side, a different way of thinking about the architectural material. And this side looking in, you can start to see that really what the interest is taking the exterior facade and in different ways, peeling it off so that it can have different ways of working. So I have a little GIF. This is just a small GIF, but the idea is that you have all of these different levels and layers to the facade, which on some levels it's operating as a wall, and some it's a curtain, and so things can be moved and reframe the work. So looking at the details, a little bit you can start to see how, for example, in this panel in the front, this is like the cartoon, which is a technique for creating tapestries that you would never get to see. So, and also you're starting to see some context. So there's really an interest in the techniques working at the level in the interior to provide additional information. And also context for how the work was produced, that it was actually this like massively collaborative piece. So this is the photo of the team who made the dinner table seated together. And a last rendering of the detail of the plaza. Some thank yous. And I will send it back to the full and open it up to talk about it. Thank you.
My first impression is that you succeeded at what you set out to do, which is to de-hierarchize the role of interior decoration. And the total effect on the outside is very fresh to me as a layperson. And this will be one of the signature museums in Washington, I think, and I would like to go into it. I'll try to formulate a question as well, but I just wanted to share my positive first reaction.
Thank you.
Sure.
What actually drives the color for this project? I mean, when I first look at the project right away, it's actually very interesting. But will that stay the same color, or what's the choice of the the color decision that you made? And also, I think I really like the way that how you make the form of the building. But when you go to the interior, it was kind of surprising to me that it's so orthogonal in a way, which I think you didn't show any of the quality that, between the two form, that maybe there is some sort of like a movement that creating a very interesting atrium or something that, that we can focus on to see in the interior. You know what I mean? Like something that more interesting to be, and also when I see the exterior form, there's a lot of movement, like intersecting, and there's a lot of like these kind of like irregular and also contrast between the regular shapes, but I couldn't find a like a very specific movement that is more interesting. Like everything seems the same degree of twisting and cutting, and so can you actually enlarge one of the the images, like one of the rendering? Yes, I actually like the physical model a lot more than the renderings. I don't know why. It might be the texture of it that looks more realistic in a way. But when you look at the modeling, like I mean, the model, it also looks like a rendering as well. So it is kind of lost. I mean, the texture. I mean, the texture in the rendering or something that the model doesn't have. And also the images that you have on the left side, those are amazing. It looks like rendering, but maybe it also reality, like it's actually very real. So those are very, very good kind of form and testing of like coloring. But what I actually kind of surprised is that I couldn't really find some sort of like a very focal point of where, I mean, I can see the entrances, but I think you might need to spend some time to make one area which is very strong kind of visualization of it, like some sort of like a jump out, maybe changing color, or maybe there's actually a digital screen or something that can change the color and the effects of it. So, I mean, the color is nice. Maybe somehow you can make it movable, not always staying the same color.
Yeah, I think that this is, the exterior renderings are still pretty preliminary. I think I need to bring back some more articulation and more distinction between the different materials.
I think my
Go ahead.
oh, sorry. So yeah, I've seen this project being developed, and I think similar comment to what Stephen made. I think the exterior is quite exquisite in terms of the formality and aesthetics and all that, but I do still have questions about the interior. And I think, and instead of jumping to, let's say, the position that the exterior form should dictate more what's happening inside in terms of structure, floor plates, all that stuff, I guess I want to posit it as a question as to what really is the status for you in, let's say, this strategy that you're identifying something that is typically and historically been second class, so to speak, like wallpaper, things that are associated with interior design, decoration, things like that. Is it an inside out problem where you're saying, I'm going to take things that have been associated with interior design on the interior and make that the exterior and to evacuate the interior? Or is it about taking those things that have been secondary in terms of surfaces attached to other structures and make them perform in a primary way, structurally, organizationally? And so to me, it's not clear. I would say the former, but I think those two options, I think, yield a completely different politics of the form in how you're positioning the initial assessment of these things that you're identifying. Because I think if you were to say, like, let's make this thing really it just belongs in the exterior and it has no bearing on the interior, then I would detach it even more so, like make it more starkly apparent that it is a kind of turning an inside interior out in that sense and projecting it much more outward, so that there's a stark contrast, kind of aesthetically stark contrast to what's happening on the inside, so that then the aesthetics of it becomes political in that sense of making that kind of statement and taking that position.
I think I definitely see that as an option, but I think I really am interested in having it more work towards what you were describing as the second point, that there's an idea that it's both, that it's the primary structure, that it's both the exterior and it's working on the interior. I think that the chunk that I've done so far was really useful to me in starting to see how it could work with specific content, but as everyone is saying, it's not there yet in terms of, like, it doesn't reach the same kind of formal expectation that the exterior has, and so it doesn't. It's a little bit of a letdown.
My sense is that if we were to understand that the envelope is also to be structural and organizational, there'd be more pressures put on it that would drive it in a certain direction. So, for example, like when we see the pleated moment, like pleated surfaces, folded plate structures have intrinsic structural properties, but the way that where you're putting them and where they are, they cannot perform structurally, because if you just start to think about how things are transferred and all that. So I would imagine that if you were to attack that more aggressively, it would become much more robust in terms of the tectonic development of that, and then in turn that would drive organization, and you wouldn't end up with the kind of floor slabbing of pancaking of just a kind of generic thing, even though you're cutting into it and creating section and all that. I would imagine that there would be a lot more, let's say, responsiveness to that interior based on how the exterior is being handled.
I think the project has the ambition to add meaning to certain aspects of the discipline of interior that might have been disregarded as having not such an importance besides the fact of being decoration. I mean, I think there is a big claim here that says interior is not just what makes it bearable to be into architecture. So it's not just what creates commodity. Is not what divides us from the orthogonal walls of a house and makes it bearable for us to be in it, but actually has a potential to be much more educational, much more far-reaching, and somehow to implement the imagination of the object. And a museum is a place where that combination could find its ultimate goal, which is interior is not a secondary aspect of architecture, is actually a primary aspect of architecture. It takes on the role of what maybe now is the label on the wall, and it brings it to a completely different level of imagination and interactivity and understanding of the audience, and brings the audience into the project of art. I think that to me seems to be the claim of the thesis. And it does encounter the issue, I think, which is actually, I think, is a technological important issue, which is the exterior is faking digitally the action and the reaction of the fabric, which is clearly a digital process that has realistic ambitions, but isn't real. Whereas the interior, I think, weirdly is more realistic in the sense that actually fabric, when it's hung, looks pretty much flat. And that has to deal with the fact that flatness has to actually become alive through the light going through the prints on top, through the material quality and the stitching and the small details of it, which actually is part of the issue of interior design, that it works on a much smaller scale, and not always that scale is easy to represent, digitally speaking. And I'm wondering if we understand the exterior to be more fabric-like because of the formal gesture, although this is clearly meant to be glass and steel and whatever else. So this is actually a building that we also know. I mean, Frank Gehry has built these buildings, and we understand how they look like, and we understand how you can achieve certain things. You also understand when you go and see them for real, I mean, that you actually experience them, that they do still have the kind of gravitas that all buildings have, and this kind of lightness of fabric kind of falls short in reality, because actually they are heavy buildings because they are existing as such, whereas the interior is a place where the ephemerality of the materials actually in architecture creates wondrous qualities, and probably is really when you experience it in private and you actually are in the space that you understand the quality and the importance of and the lightness and of these materials. And it's very hard to obtain that, but I think maybe that's a challenge for the next month, is to understand how the interior can transmit to the audience this quality that actually fabric has, plus the layers of information and the layers of, fulfilling somehow the other in terms of the history that has been told, and how the interior does this. And maybe the exterior needs to be more tectonic so that it also dissipates some of the misunderstanding that I think now the representation has. But I applaud the impetus. I think there is not much that is done on the topic. I think there are a few very good writers that wrote beautiful books about the value of the interior, not towards the interior of Lois Vental. I mean, there are a few people that have taken on the problem of making the interior history to become a disciplinary issue in architecture. And I think this project does that, and adds to this another layer of meaning, which I think is quite important.
Yeah, that's definitely, I agree that that's the next project. Because it's like I've started to touch on some ideas where it's like I'm starting to get a handle on the content, and I have certain layers where it's like partially it's a sort of traditional narrative that's being peeled back. The layers are operating like that, and also different contextual information. But I think what you're saying about increasing the tectonic of the exterior, and then also working more on like the new idea of the interior is going to be really important.
Because I think it's important also the comment that Steve made on the quality of the exterior not being in the interior. And I think you need to somehow make a decision, because the exterior is faking the idea of fabric. The interior is actually maybe more doing the fabric than what the exterior is. And the problem is, does that become paramount? So then you're going to have to make certain part act the same way or more similar way. And maybe that means you lose the flexibility, you lose transparency, and they become more sculptural, but maybe you still need them to make a point. Or on the other hand, do you go all the way into digital representation and really try to make place for all those qualities that actually would activate much more than it shows the space in reality. I mean, when you see Petra's work on Ren's work, you understand that what she does to it, it creates the magic and the wonders of theater. So without her work on it, would not act the same way. The building would not have the same meaning, would not have the same space in the site, would not operate in the same way towards the audience. And it really creates the theatrical. And so I think it is hard to be able to manifest those qualities through renderings, but maybe that's really the issue now to tackle, I think. Do you need a big gesture to fake it, or do you actually need to go closer to reality to make that happen and to get the audience on board?
Yeah, thank you. That's really helpful.
One comment that I want to tell you is when I look at, you see the images on the left side where the pink, purple with a lot of pixelated, that one is a rendering or is a physical object? That one.
This middle rendering, this here, this is a photograph of a physical
this
model.
one.
This is a
And
model.
you see how you have these vertical lines that creating the, on the second, like on the right side images, yeah, these kind of vertical lines, like if you imagine those are being, something that behind this has a structure, sort of like assembly behind it, that can go in a different direction of the force slab, that you can creating some sort of like a very rigid, sort of like a systems within the interior. Because right now when I look at the models or the renderings, it looks very thin. Like it doesn't have the volumes of the thickness of the skin that which you need to create an architectural building. So that is missing that kind of like 2 meters layers of structures that will, force you to think about how the force slabs and the skin that works together when you do a sections or some animation cuts or whatever. So that will give you a lot more depth and more solid, like a statement when you see the interior. So I would suggest that you really look at it like maybe 1 week of work on the skin and how that can generate some sort of like a structure behind it. So different kind of pattern will generate different kind of structures behind it that works with the interior. And that will help you a lot when you go from an exterior to an interior, that kind of transitions when you talk about your project. Because when I see it from an exterior transition to an interior, I kind of lost the interest of seeing it. It just, putting images of hanging arts and everything. So it's missing that transition.
Yeah, totally. All right, thank you.
I have one more comment to make, and some of this overlaps with what the others have said. Again, I think you've succeeded in many ways in reversing traditional hierarchies. You talked about the worry that woman is sometimes taken as other in the usual hierarchy. I wonder if there's a danger of the otherness still being prominent, in the sense that when you invert a hierarchy, one of the things you still have to say is what's happening to the previously dominant term in the hierarchy. And Stephen has already mentioned there's some orthogonal elements on the interior, but what are you going to do with that previously dominant orthogonal character of recognizable museum architecture? One thing you could do is you could subordinate it, you could leave it there as something kind of boring that's been overcome, or you could find a new role for it to play. This happens in a lot of fields, including the fields I work in, not architecture, where philosophers are often trying to reverse the polarity of usual hierarchical relationships, but then they end up not saying what's happening to the secondary term, to the previously dominant term. So I don't know if that makes sense, but try to find some way to do something new with those elements that you're putting in a lesser place compared to the dominant place they were in before.
Right, cool, thank you.
But there's a real air of novelty about this, especially on the exterior. Got me thinking.
Thanks.
Okay, great. Let's move on. Thanks, Christina.
All right, thank you.
You're up, Kumaran?
Hi, I'm Kumaran Parthiban. My thesis is called The Z Object. I'm going to share my screen. Swipe, swipe, scroll, scroll, and scroll all the way down infinitely. Like and share content at any and all times of the day. These are the defining behaviors that are enabled by the internet, social media, and technological advancements of the age of Gen Z. Especially with the pandemic in place, all of us are forced to behave like the Generation Z. We use various digital platforms to keep ourselves connected at all times while within the confines of our domestic spaces. My thesis, the Z object, takes this as an optimistic departure point to create a new digital construct in virtual reality as an extension of our physical world. The Z object is a digital asset that one owns, which is personalized and customized to each individual or a group of people. This is made possible by moving away from our 2D touch screens to a more humane, three-dimensional gestural space of virtual reality, where we can express ourselves through digital materiality and objects from both our physical and digital worlds. This forms the architecture of the Z object. Within this space, we can easily change our surroundings to better suit our timely needs with simple gestures like move, scale, rotate, and a 3D paintbrush. Being able to take on multiple identities that better represent ourselves and the spaces we occupy in our daily lives. In this state, the architecture is able to quickly adapt to our rapidly changing zeitgeist of our contemporary world. At this point, I'd like to share with you a video on Vimeo, which explains all of this. I will also share the same thing on Zoom, but I recommend all of you watching it on Vimeo for higher quality. I'm gonna keep the video looping for the conversation. So what you saw on the video was the very first Z object that I designed for myself, which represents me, an architect, a designer, and a gamer, connecting the various objects, tools, and platforms which are defining aspects of my life. With the new normal pointing more towards staying connected within your domestic spaces, the Z objects will become the next frontier in immersive and interactive architectural space. Thank you.
So I want to make sure I understood. The Nike shoe was being modified somehow to be a slightly variant brand for an individual or a subgroup?
Yes.
Okay. On a practical level, why would Nike allow you to do that? Or is it within your right to modify? Because these brands typically spend a lot of money to make sure that things go out exactly as they design them.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is we would have like the tools to modify our environment, so which includes all the objects within it. It could be furniture, it could be, but within digital space, like we're not confined just to like the architectural environments. You can also bring in your very digital life into the world as objects, and that's what I try to do in this. Like things that are very close to me, like the shoe, my AirPods, and all my gaming devices, and like sort of design tools like the paintbrush, sort of like take on a 3D, much more gestural stance within the digital space of the Z object, and that's what that is.
So are the Z objects going to exist only in virtual reality, or are they going to be physical as well?
No, they exist only in the virtual reality.
Oh. I see.
For miniatures, I actually did make the only one existence of it in physical reality, which was in terms of like a wearable. And it was the Z object itself, which was in its only one state, which was a wearable, which was like taking the position of the VR gear, which you're seeing right now. So yeah.
Okay.
But no, it exists only in the digital space.
I have a question. I mean, what's your take on like? Is this thing only you're like working within yourself, or is there somebody that can actually join you, or to interact with you on this object?
Yeah, definitely. People can join me. So this one that you're seeing was just my personal space, but yes, the Z objects could accommodate like other people joining in and have like a collaborative interactive space. So that's what I'm trying to see. Like I haven't like so far in thesis, like I only designed my own Z object, but like before the finals, I definitely want to design like at least a couple of more Z objects where I show interaction with others.
I mean, I really like the idea that you can have your own space, like which is like 3-dimensional. It's like virtual and then physical, and you scan some objects and then you put it in, you modified it. Maybe you can, after you design it, you can order it and you print it or whatsoever, you fabricate it, and then you can share it with different media. I mean, it's a new way of thinking how to design interactive with people, and I think it's actually very. I'm not sure what exactly that this thing will do with architecture or whatsoever, but then it actually quite interesting. I don't know what I'm actually looking at, but I can see that this is somehow the new generation of like younger designers, and how they actually looking at all these social media and very personal interests, and then how to share with other people. And this is actually something maybe like it's a Second Life or some other this kind of platform. So are you trying to create a new platform for social media, or what exactly your mission? I mean,
I guess it's an integration of like tools and platforms and like way of life in general. But because one, I do like play, I've played Second Life, I've played a bunch of VR games and like online chat rooms on VR. I've made so many friends on VR chat rooms, but I think like none of these spaces that are already there right now, like are like an integration of everything. And most of these VR spaces that are there even right now, like they don't have any sense of architecture in them. It's like someone's just created like a shell for you to like take on, like inhabit, but it doesn't really reflect us or any of the needs. Like as architects, like we customize, and we're still like one of the forms of like disciplines of design where we customize and tailor make things to our clients. And I think that is possible with the Z object, and with virtual reality, it's much more easier to constantly change and integrate all these elements. And I think that, and also the sense of immersion, like it's exactly like the physical reality. Like it's only another if you consider it to be the other, but like the next generation that's to come, when they're born into like a world with technology and social media and all of this, it's like taken for granted. So they don't see that divide. So I still see the Z object as an extension of our physical world. So you wouldn't like, it's not a dystopian future where you always spend like your entire life in it, but it's like almost the same as using your digital devices, like your computer and your TV or something like that. But instead of seeing content on a flat 2D interface, you see it on a 3D interface. And I think that's where like the architecture comes in.
Well, on my end, I'm happy to see that the narrative is now coming together. So just from my point of view, I do think that there is something undefinable yet about the project. I'm glad actually that Stephen, you're seeing this, because I've seen this project many times before. And to me, I was always in between the problem of the object and the problem of the interface. And I still wanted this to be an object to begin with. Like you would buy your interface and it's only yours, and there's this physicality. And then you put in your glasses, you put in your hand devices, and then you start customizing it. And the idea that there is still something that is physical, which belongs to you and you only, but then within that you start customizing this environment. And I think it's quite architectural actually, the project, because it tackles the issue of that we all are living in, which is we are now faced with living in our home, which are supposedly the place where we should be happy, isn't it? The home, isn't that what we've been told, that we buy a home, and maybe it's the most important person any human being does in their lifetime is buying their home. You work all your life, you buy a house, you pay the mortgage, and then you become this happy person where your family is, when your loved ones is. And the reality is that we realize now that I think the house could kill us. We've been home for 6 months, and I think now the moment is like we start to understand, okay, so the interior is actually quite important, is the thing between me and the walls that allows me to be comfortable in this architecture. And truly the thing between you and the wall is the thing where I think the object stays. It's like you have an environment, but then it's what you create in the environment, even if it's completely digital, that makes the relationship viable. And I think you can do it with furniture, you can do it with ambience and lighting. And I think this project proposes to do it with virtual reality, and proposes that the virtual reality is a place of ultimate communication, like where you work on, you play on, you communicate with, is your phone, is your Netflix, is your Zoom, it's your place of work and connection. And as of now, I think this is actually what is happening. And so this project, I think, tries to design that, or giving the audience the possibility to do that. What if you could do that?
Actually, when I first see this project, it gives me something that what I'm actually working on in reality, when I'm actually working with a lot of projects that need to be personalized, and adding like yourself sort of like a value to it. For example, like I'm working with like a Mini Cooper, designing a light that within the light fixture that we adding like maybe like the music that I like, the names, the pictures, or even I scan my cat fur and then put it onto the within the light. Basically, it's a clear. I'll show you. I mean, I can share a screen later to show you the Mini Cooper series that I did. And then after that, we actually print it out, and then we print it out in full color. and then we actually replace the actual light on the Mini Cooper. So basically, there's a lot of like these kind of personalizing design that changing the the original design of like from Mini Cooper or from, for example, BMW or Nike whatsoever, is starting to get this kind of personalizing, customizing, design to it, and then you can fabricate it yourself. So I actually would like to, if you finish this project, you can actually send it to me. I can help you print a color print with the Stratasys machines, like which has full color with clear objects, and basically, I imagine that you really need to print this out as a full color object and then present it between physical and virtual.
That's a different project. That sounds like. Because I think Stephen, you want to see this come back into the physical, but my understanding is that this is virtual. This begins and ends in the virtual. That's my understanding.
Ramiro, I agree with you. Because that was the point. Like even when Elena wanted me to the structure of thesis was such that for miniatures we always make a model. So Elena had suggested to me that I should make like the one physical existence of the Z object in the physical world. And that's why I made it as a wearable. I can actually very quickly show you.
But hold on, let me finish my thought. While you disappeared into your virtual background and reemerged. But so on that point, it does, I think what makes this difficult for me to discuss is I still don't know what the architecture is, right? And is it the interface? Are you? And I guess it does bring up the question of how you're defining architecture. But actually, what was interesting is that I think this should be called the Z subject, not the Z object, because I think there's a certain hyper subjectivity about the personalization of this virtual reality and having a certain level of control of all of your things and being able to bring it in there. And even the fact that you can look at yourself doing it, there's this really bizarre hyper subjectivity to this, which then lets me think of okay, can this be an interface that explores hypersubjectivity that then could be pulled back out and applied to? Because I like Stephen, maybe this is an outdated thing now, but I need to end back in the physical somehow. I think that's incredibly important. But so if this is about, because if this is only virtual, I read it as escapist to a certain extent, not dystopian, but more escapist.
And that the presentation of it is something that is.
I don't think it's escapist because I spend a lot of my time in VR and I don't find it as an escapist route. I think there's so much potential that no one's really explored in virtual reality. And yeah, I think that's what this thesis brings in.
But I think we should accept that there is an escapist issue. I don't think that's what we're forced to be, by the way. We're all at home.
Yeah, I didn't mean that as a pejorative or negative thing.
I actually wish we would have something like this, and that would be detached from all these devices that we have to carry from one room to another, and it would be much more playful, frankly, the way in which we live and we work. I'm starting to realize that this 19th century idea of the house as a place of happiness is actually completely outdated, and it doesn't represent how we live. And truly, the houses that we have and we live in are bearable because of the furniture and the objects we have and the things that still we keep dear. And it seems like this is the ultimate object, meaning is the object that has this kind of level of comfort and connection and soothing qualities almost, and creative qualities that make living in domesticity bearable after 6 months of reclusion. I feel like that we live a monastic life, and I think this allows us to have actually a visual and also pragmatically a level of connection and creativity with the world outside, or even with our ourselves. I'm not sure that it's a bad thing to be is an escape, because we're escaping from, I think, an outdated model of architectural housing, which we all live in. Without the outside world, and without all, without all the hours we spend at work or having drinks or having dinners or going to the ocean, etc. Without all of that, we really are confronted with what housing is today, what architecture is, and this is the escape to that. So I'm not sure it's negative. That's what I think we should accept the fact that it's an escape, and maybe it's a desirable escape at this point.
I don't know. Maybe it's the end of the escape though, because it's like soon we'll be trying to escape from the virtual to back into the real. Like we'll have to book a vacation to go back to reality. So I think like we're just at the edge where I can see what Kumaran's saying, that it's like, oh, this feels like work. Like it doesn't feel like an escape. Like it doesn't feel like going anywhere other than where you are all the time anyway. So I think like we're getting close to that edge, but maybe there's that, like the edge is still charged, but things keep an old charge even after the reality has moved on.
But so maybe the takeaway from this midterm is that the interactivity with other people, meaning the social life, as of now, it feels like the experience might be on the lonely end, meaning that there is still not a sense of who could enter this virtually or physically. I think that is a big question that Steve has brought to the table, and I think should be addressed. And my sense also that we should address also what happens to the architecture around, and what happens to the architecture that hosts this kind of lifestyle. My sense is that actually the house that would host this would be very similar to your house, with a green screen and nothing else. I mean, you really have all of the minimal, and then you have a big space where all of this takes place. And so the idea that each room has its own program and each room has its own furniture, it goes quickly away when you have this lifestyle. So my sense is that those kind of conclusions would maybe answer what Ramiro is asking for, which is what are the architectural implications. I think those should be somehow implemented for the final.
Okay, any final comments? Okay, great. Thanks, Kumaran.
Thank you.
Okay, so Ziyou?
Yes.
Next, great.
All right. Okay, I'm gonna do the share screen as well.
One second, I'm gonna stop sharing it.
All right. Okay. Okay, hi everyone. My name is Ziyou, and what my thesis is about how to use 3D printing technology to actually print some type of housing in Los Angeles. As we know, LA has this like kind of housing shortage, and but there is actually a lot of land that people just use as their backyard, and then now people are trying to use their land to put caravans or something ADUs on top of them. But they're all done by traditional methods. So I'm trying to incorporate the new technology, which is 3D printing concrete, into these crises. So let's start with the precedent study. This is the team I'm actually going to work with. The 3D print technology is not like a new concept or anything. It's been there for years. And then people have tried to different things. Like this team did the bridge in Shanghai. And then also talking about housing, this is the team that's done a sort of a house in Austin, and then their goal is to build a village in Mexico. And then so it's a relatively cheap and very quick method compared to the usual construction method that we use here in Southern California. It takes something like a week to construct a house rather than the 1 to 2 years. And then you can get a decent, well, you can get a decent dwelling. I wouldn't say a legit house, but some kind of shelter. And then it's good for like special circumstances. If you have like a lot that you're not using and you want to put a house in there quickly, or some type of like emergency in like after disaster areas. So and then now I'm trying to identify the problems with 3D printing concrete to use in housing. Here are the 5 I've been thinking of. The first one, since we're in LA, this is a big thing, earthquake. I mean, like I've been talking to constructors all around. I'm like, the simple question: why do you all use wood to build houses, which is cheap, and then it has like bad installation, and then it tends to break a lot. You need a lot of maintenance compared to the big heavy concrete. And then second one is plumbing. You can see with the stuff here, if you want to put plumbing system inside, you have to dig within the foundation, and that's extra work. That kind of defeats the purpose of using like factory or modern technology. And then third is installation. Concrete is not a great material for like temperature control or anything like that. And then fourth is how do you open a window? So stuff like, and still add this as a, so you need extra stuff, you know, like a extra beam on top, and then to cut like an ugly window inside it, which is not what I'm looking for. And then the fifth is the roof. So I start about sorting out like all the problems. First is earthquake and plumbing. This can be solved by using a hibernated chassis. This is kind of idea I got from you know, the trailer homes or like mobile homes. Like you have a big metal chassis that incorporates wheels, and because there's wheels, there has to be some kind of suspension. It can be just a little bit of buffer, but that will be enough to save the concrete on top from earthquake. And then also within the chassis, you can embed the plumbing system and the electrical system, so you don't have to like dig inside the ground to do it. And then that's the whole purpose of building it fast. And then the installation, and then as you can see here, the concrete walls are not a big solid wall. There is actually a chamber within it. And then within the chamber, there's air. And then within the air, we're gonna apply something called aerogel. It's not really a new material, but it's something that's going to be used in the architecture sector really soon. And then this is a really thin and very light, kind of expensive material, but if you lay it around inside it, it will create a really great like buffer area for temperature and then stuff like that. And then also for windows, like because the way 3D printing is, you can only technically print upwards. I mean, support is not there yet. So if you just print like a circle, you'll end up getting a coffin. So what we end up using is doing gaps between the walls and then creating a huge skylights so we can have sunlight coming in and then ventilation. And fourth is how do I solve the roof problem? We're doing this kind of a 2-layering system with the walls. The outside will be looking pretty and then looking curvy, and then the inside wall will act as a structural support. So on top of that, beams can just lay as like conventional stuff. And then on top of that, that's where the roof will go. And then also the skylight windows. And then how do I imagine the 3D printing tiny house process go about? So a truck with the hibernated chassis, and then on top of that, all the materials and the equipment will be carried into the lot. And then the rails will be set around it, and then the robotics will start printing. As you can see, you need minimum labor. So there's one guy controlling it, and then probably 2 or 3 guys putting all the material into the machine, and then other people to just like supervise and then to see if anything goes wrong to fix it. So it needs a really small team, but the machine actually does a lot more work than actual workers here. I work with construction workers here. A lot of them are very lazy, and then that's actually one of the hardest part to control within the construction process. And then after that, you'll have a finished house. And then to include all of the stuff I've talked about before, here is the design proposal I come up with. And then, as you can see, it creates a kind of a new dynamic in the old suburban neighborhoods, which is all kind of Victorian wooden houses, or like the Costco houses that you buy everywhere. And then the good thing about 3D printing technology in general, it's a quote that I learned from Stephen Ma. It's called massive customization. It means that whatever you like with your house, you can get it through 3D printing technology. Even from before, you can get like furnitures and then stuff like that. Now you can have your exterior and then your interior and even your floor plan due to the new technology that's 3D printing. And then you can get like very fluid and then variable floor planning rather than just the boxes as before. Because generally with 3D printing, like whatever shape you print, it's just the cost of the material. And then there is no spike if you do a curved wall or a straight wall. And then here are the model. Oh, this model, yeah, as you can see, it's printed with the Prusa printer. And then all of this model is printed with, except the roof, the walls are printed without support. So that's kind of my little test to see if the patterns and then the curves I use can be printed. And then as for the final product, we're printing this actually in real life in China. It's probably going to be done within the next 2 weeks. That's just another way to show that it's a really fast process. And then we're going to do a kind of discovery channel, how it's made. It's like a how it's made kind of documentary with close-ups and then with like drone shots and then like the whole process shots of how it's done. And then yes, that's that. Thank you.
Right. For someone like me who's not professionally conversant with the state of the art in 3D printing or tiny houses, can you help summarize which aspects of this project are already pretty standard and well known by now, and which parts are you pushing it a step beyond the current practice?
Okay, so how do I put it? Also, so it's actually like you have the Prusa printers that's ready.
Yeah.
It's just how you do the design of the models that come up with that's like follow up. So it's like you have the factory to make whatever toys that you want. It's just designing the toys that can be used and then can be applied to the circumstance of it, which is trying to like get more ADUs and then get more housing within the LA area without like having the client to spend ages to wait for the ADUs to be built. And then to like explore how you can do design to make a house that's also interesting and then but also cheap. That's like doable.
So is 3D printing and cement already being done?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, like way back.
Okay.
So like housing like this, and then there's also like there are houses like some kind of factory office building that was built in Dubai, and then of course the bridge that's can be printed. So basically, like you can print basically a lot of things. It's just how you use the technology to print a house that's interesting and then usable and then also cheap.
So would you say that this is more of a technical manufacturing design thesis or a formal aesthetic architecture thesis?
I would say somewhere in between that. Like
I knew it.
I wouldn't go like one specific direction. So the idea is I want to actually print something for real while doing interesting design with like interesting formal studies. I actually did a formal study of like 5 different ways that you can print houses with 3D printing. And then this is the way that's actually really doable. You can do arches, you can do a dome, and then you can do like boxes.
Well, yeah. I mean, we know you can do all these things, but I guess it's because I remember seeing this from the miniatures review. It doesn't look like the design has changed at all, or if it has, very, very little. And maybe it was more about going into manufacturing it and stuff like that. But I guess in terms of an architectural problem or thesis, I'm wondering what the problem is.
Right.
You know, I still don't know, because I mean, it seems like there's a lot of energy in terms of, you know, the technical demands of producing this and manufacturing it for low cost. So, you know, it's more, these are design problems. So I'm still left wondering, what is the architectural problem that's being worked on? Is it the types of surfaces that you know, that you're using for the walls and defining the kind of shell and all that? So I don't know, I think you got to suss that out somehow.
I agree with Ramiro what you said about you know, you is a form thesis or is a you know, fabrication thesis, and when he answered, it's in between, trying to do both. But what I see is actually he's not doing both. Actually, right. It doesn't have any new formal language that creating something that different. And then in terms of fabrications, I think it's lack of the modulated or some sort of like a tectonic or something that related to a more intelligent way of assembling. And for example, what I see right away, there's problems of this wall is a single surface wall. It's not gonna hold this tall.
It's not a single surface. Oh, sorry.
I mean, what I want to mention is the wall that you're gonna generate. You might want to introduce delamination of layers. If you look at this images here from the top side, the wall is only single. It's more like a single thin layer. If you start to delaminating, imagine there's two layers. One start to delaminating, creating the inner shell, which is different from the curvature outside, and you can create like a stronger foundation or wall systems. And then you can, you can put like insulations in between, and you can solve all these kind of pumping, lighting system, electronics, and also you can actually pre-design the way where the structure actually hit the concrete wall. So with that kind of design direction of the fabrication way of printing, you can help the construction. So that is one approach that you want to try to solve that. And then the other one is like, which you want to do the form, which what I see here, you're not actually creating something that, extra than just vertical printing. So you're not trying to create something that new about the form. So maybe you need to go a lot more beyond what you just, what you're trying to do. You are trying to do this and that, but then you're actually not doing good on both, right?
Yeah, so I mean, and on that, I think, especially with these images, like I could imagine the thesis being about thinness in concrete, so let's just say if you were to push, like how thin can I push these? So they have a like Richard Serra-like quality, right? These kind of slightly floppy ruled surfaces. If you say, look, okay, 3D printing concrete, certain scale allows me to push the formal aesthetic qualities of thinness. And there might be areas where you can get so thin that the concrete almost feels like it's like dissipating, like it's disappearing, so to speak. So it brings up other material qualities through pushing that agenda that this fabrication material technique allows you to do. So it's not about the fabrication or 3D printing, but it's about exploring what it allows you to do to push these formal aesthetic agendas, right? I think if it was about the manufacturing, then I think, like Stephen suggested, you might be looking at controlling the mechanisms, right? Like moving the mechanisms around or modifying or doing something so it yields something that's unexpected and different than what you might get in a conventional 3D printing concrete system.
Yes, I understand. I need to identify a more serious problem and then come up with like more obvious and then more surprising solution to it.
I think otherwise it sounds like it's more about optimization and logistics, like just working through the logistic problems of it.
Yeah.
Well, Given the fact that we're printing, not this one. So everybody's printing. I also think maybe also is a good use of time to think about what would mean to a neighborhood with these. I mean, I'm not sure that there is a time to implement as much as we would like probably at this point, because there is 1 month of production, and I think this project lives or dies on the production, and I think it's important that this is done. To actually get to that level, I think is quite an achievement. But I think might be a possible scenario is to understand what would happen to a landscape of this. What happens if this becomes actually a way of building? So the tiny house is operating in the same way that the wood frame does, meaning economically speaking. So that what is the result then on a neighborhood? I mean, is there any changes in that? What could be what could it be that happening in our zoning or in our utilities, even just, or does it is only one every million of houses is like this, or does it become something else? I just wanna say that I think it's important that you then bring that speculation to the thesis, so that somehow you add also what are the urbanistic implications of doing something of this kind that moves, that rotates, and it goes on a site in this way that has no earth movements and has no utilities attached on the underground. I mean, what are the things that change in our current schema? I'm just saying this because this is actually being now realized. So I think changes are probably not in the schema of work in the overall plan for the project, but I think multiple designs could happen still between here and the end, and it might start to understand what are the implications on a larger scale or multiplicity. What does it mean?
Yes.
Okay, great. Any final comments?
Actually, I have one response to Ramiro's take on the thin wall. Like, I mean, that is something that I think is interesting idea, where because when we do concrete printing, it always feels like very heavy and very thick, and in reality, it's actually super heavy. Like if you look at something like that. So what he is trying to do here, it has some quality of like trying to do it super thin, but in a way where it's actually not realistic right now. So maybe there's a way that you can emphasize where the denomination of maybe some area that can thin out, some area that can actually thicken, and then in actually not just like X and Y direction, or you can actually do it in Z and Y directions. So where delamination of layers from 1 layer to 2 layers to create different wall thickness, and then necessary where we're close to the door or close to the window, you have a super thin wall, and then where you have like more structure area that you can have like thicker wall. So I think that is something that you can add on to this design, to make it more interesting, I think.
That's a great suggestion.
Okay, great. All right, thanks, Ziyou.
Thank you.
Who's next? Srimoyee, are you next?
Yeah.
Yes,
hi. Let me share my screen. Do you guys see it?
Yes.
Okay. Hello, I'm Sri, and the current working title of my project is Monumental Ephemera. Some of you have already seen the development of this project all the way from prep to thesis, but for those of you who are seeing it for the first time, I'd like to briefly talk about the research that led to the development of this architectural thesis. There are sort of 4 tangents that I embarked on during my research phase. Firstly, set design in theatrical plays, the props and their relation to scenography and the spectator experiencing the whole ensemble. And then contemporary embodiments of scenography. So looking into Diller Scofidio Renfro's Mile Long Opera and the relationship of the High Line to this dynamic event. that sort of brings to life the architectural sentiment of the High Line. And in the process of absorbing all this research, I stumbled upon Shumi's Parc de la Villette, and in a way, the grid-like setup of his autonomous follies would sort of form a theatrical setup of its own, will be seen as a major influence of my project. And alongside these above tangents, I had also taken interest in children's pop-up books as a way to address this ephemeral quality of theatrical props, which when merged with folie structure sort of form these monumental ephemeral pieces. So in a way, as we go through the rest of the work, I've tried to sort of merge these tangents into one architectural reading. So the next step was to choose a site that would present itself as a clean slate to then deploy these tangents and form a cumulative architectural expression. We chose Hunters Point in Long Island, New York, which is currently going through a major revamp. Weiss Manfredi's designs for this abandoned waterfront aims to celebrate the city's skyline and also turn it into an invigorating public space. So essentially, this project is my take on what this public space means to the city of New York and what is its entity and impact towards the city, but also as an autonomous element in and of itself. So as you can see in the master plan, I started dividing up, let me zoom in a little bit. I started dividing up the land into different pieces, much like pieces of a puzzle. And each piece has a name and expression of its own. I have placed 5 of these ephemeral follies throughout this urban space, and each of them fold, unfold, turn, rotate to either accommodate seating or act as a backdrop scenery of some sort. We'll quickly go through each piece and what it means as a standalone entity and also in relation to one another. I will get back to this part later. Okay, so first piece. So the first folly is named The Playground. It portrays bustling Times Square on one end and a theatrical backdrop of New York on the other. Spectators can occupy the playful seating spread around to see the transformation of these spaces. Yes, the video is lagging a little bit, but it's supposed to be pretty smooth. Okay. So you can see some zoomed in shots of how the space looks when the pop-up plates are collapsed versus when they're flat down, and some zoomed in shots of how it looks like to be in these spaces. So then the second one is called a confessional. It portrays the definition of a confessional through different lenses, using the vast expanse of Brooklyn Bridge, the greenscape of Central Park, and the comfort of a typical living room of a Victorian apartment in New York. We try to define what a confessional space means to an individual or a group of people. So this is, again, zoomed in shots of the spaces itself. We can see the Brooklyn Bridge plate, pop-up plates on one side versus a more domesticated plates on this end. Coming in the third one, it's called Invisible Corridor, which acts as a reflection space of the follies lined up in front of it, but also acts as an elevated space that frames the skyline of New York City. Zoom in shots of the pieces itself. And then coming to the last piece, we find the mimicry, which celebrates the different sounds of New York using a series of boomboxes hanging off of one of the pop-up plates. We try to stage a scene where different sounds of different boroughs and different atypical characteristics of New York is brought to life through the space. All of these, so this is, I understand this is like a bit of a fragmented presentation because this eventually will form into one cohesive video which takes you through all the spaces, but this is just to understand what these different spaces are and what it means to be in them, and what is their relationship to one another. And then these are some of the model photos that I have. This is essentially one of the pieces that I had designed. This was the confessional, and these are the model photos showing that. So I guess to sort of conclude, we see a series of these ephemeral pavilions spread through the urban space that take a life of their own. I would like to emphasize on the definition of ephemerality in this project. I sort of look at it as a two-sided coin. I know at the current stage I've only given emphasis to the meaning of ephemerality in the short term. However, the site itself poses a condition of possible flooding in 100 years, which poses the question of how these pavilions would then react to such an environmental condition. I don't have a concrete answer yet. However, there is a potential for some of these pieces to transform into pavilions on stilts, much like Rossi's floating theater or the collapsible plates simply laying flat on the ground, merging with the submerged landscape, thereby giving a new definition to the clean slate. The master plan that you see here is how it would potentially look like when the water kind of, bleeds into the site, and how parts of the pop-up pavilions are submerged, but whereas parts are visible. And this is to just sort of give you an idea of what it is when it's in the normal position versus when the flood occurs. And I will share the link with you guys so you can see here. Ooh. Okay, I just shared the Miro board so you guys can take a closer look into all these pieces. I think that's it. I hope I made sense.
Can I first ask about the title? Because it's got a provocative contradiction in it, monumental ephemera. And you talked also about starting with a clean slate on the Long Island site. And for all the Rossi, the monumental means we're never starting with a clean slate. So I'm just wondering what work is being done by the word monumental. I can see the ephemera, of course. Mm-hmm. What's the monumental part?
So I think the monumental part comes in using certain monumental aspects of things, like using Corinthian columns or Roman columns, and sort of having these traditional concept of spaces. I think that's the definition of monumental, and the idea that when these plates are collapsed down and just form a part of the topography, it sort of looks like these meandering pathways that like a ruin-like quality to it, which I guess is where the monumental word is generated from. And the ephemera are the things that move.
How long will these ephemera be standing up?
You mean like when they fold and when they fold back down?
Right.
Or, well, that happens throughout the day. The way I'm looking at it is maybe like during sundown, they sort of pop up and form these spaces of their own, versus in the morning, they're sort of open and have this ruin-like quality to it.
So it's tied to time of day rather than to say like a visiting circus that leaves town after a while. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
What precedents are there for architecture that changes throughout the day in the world? Other than louvers controlling sunlight on buildings. Is there anything else like this?
I don't know. I think the only things that come to mind are like facades changing like direction of the shading during different times of the day. But this was sort of, I guess not. I don't think I'm aware.
Can't think of anything. I rarely do I say that. but yeah, I think you got us that, Graham. That is not an established category. I think we often talked about. There's one that Peter Trummer likes to point out about just about air conditioning vents opening and closing automatically over the course of the day. It doesn't really change the building that much at all. I think we could say there were some. There were ephemera that were obviously diurnal, like the John Labatut did for the 1930, 36, the World's Fair in New York, these huge light shows that were the first kind of light shows in architecture right before Adolf Speer did them in Nuremberg. And those are obviously only on at night. And we could say that maybe in a less kind of high architecture realm, the parks in Coney Island would take on a dramatically different characteristic at night because it was fashionable to promote the newly cheap electric bulb. And so they put in tens of people who had never seen an electric bulb might go to Coney Island and see like 2 million bulbs on at once, and people would actually sunbathe under them. And so there was a lot of stuff that was switched day to night there. Take away the day to night, I think of another one that we also learned about from Cole House, which is the in one of those 3 parks in Coney Island, the mock-up of Lower Manhattan that would burst into flames, and then hundreds of firefighters would come out and fight the fires, and then it would all just reset every hour or hour, and then the new tourists would come in, or theme park visitors would come in, and then the whole thing would burst into flames again. But that's it. So very little that fits that realm. Maybe one of the practitioners here can do me better. Ramiro, Elena, you guys got anything?
Built? No.
It's a tough one, right?
Am I in trouble?
There must be someone who's done it, but none of us know. So no, I think it's fun. It's a fun.
Or it's it's infrastructural. It becomes infrastructural in terms of bridges and dams and things like that. Walking city, then it becomes more speculative.
Yeah. But yeah, this is a kind of practical proposal because you probably could build this where these things flipped up or got put away every day. Yeah. Steven, nothing? So yeah, it's an interesting angle that I think all of us. It feels like there should be examples that we know, but I don't think that I can come up with anything.
But I remember this from last time, and I'm still wondering if the temporal aspect, which I guess is the ephemera aspect, is underexplored, as well as and I think the use of kind of historical elements, traditional elements, like I think that and this is maybe just more personal in terms of wanting to see how temporality could come into play in terms of affecting the legibility of these traditional historical elements, references, because I think the temporal aspect is intrinsic to the project, right? Mm-hmm. In terms of flooding and as well as the movement of all these things. So I think rather than, I think you could fold in some kind of engineering of change into this thing that wouldn't simply be left to weather and chance, but that you can play with that. With this thing that I think could be really fascinating.
Okay.
Well, one thing that I don't understand with the graphics here, where when I see the plan view that you have these 2D like circle, which they are actually unfolded, or am I wrong, or what exactly that? Like for example,
mean like the parts that are like plopped up versus.
Yeah, so when I see it in 3D, like it actually fold up, becoming a wall.
Right, so the idea is that on certain parts of the day, they would fold down and be part of the topography almost.
So it's like the pop-up book
flat
reference.
So
Yeah.
it's references to the images that you had in the beginning, where these when you open something and then all the
Yes.
structures becoming 3D.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is the monumental columns and those movable as well, or are they fixed?
No, so only the, so if you, let's say, so the parts that are like circular almost, that are plopped up and have like two sides to it, are only the movable parts. Elements like the colonnades and like the, you know, like the Corinthian columns and like the concrete or porcelain walls are all fixed. So when the pieces are when they're laying flat on the ground, it's almost like a series of meandering paths that you go through, versus when they're all popped up, it creates like individual spaces of its own.
Because right now, when I look at this, when I see the beginning, all the reference images, and also some of these ideas, like what I'm actually imagining is maybe there's a lot more change in state, where it's not just a fold up or something that, you know, you change the condition of the site, where becoming higher and lower, and then things that are vertical becoming horizontal. Like, you know, there's a lot more interactions between it, not just, you know, fold up and vertical walls. Like that will also do with the flooding that you want to do. I think maybe the flooding that come into the site, where maybe there's a higher land and lower land, and then there's like a layering of it, like hierarchy of the layering, the transition of the layering. It's kind of missing between the flat and the 3D. So something in between, I think it need to happen, because when you look at that really interesting image where the folding paper one, it always has some sort of like a structure transforming into, you know, something that in between 3D and 2D. So I think the layering effects, it need to be a little bit stronger in a way.
Okay.
That would be my comment.
Like, why couldn't more things fold?
I mean, they could. I guess it was structurally speaking, it would just be more and more unstable now, because like when things fold off of foldable things.
But I think that's what would make it more interesting. I mean, I think like, you know, I think this is like with the pop-up book, it's like using the ideal position of the pop-up book when you first get it and everything's nice and stiff and rigid, but over time, you know, things get a little bit wonky. But I thought, I was just thinking as Stephen asked that, like, you know, imagine these columns in a tilted fashion, like somehow it begins to play off of our understanding and legibility of these things. And I just imagine, like, what would this whole thing look like if everything could fold down? Like, not perfectly flat, obviously, but you would get these bizarre configurations. And then maybe the unfolding into position, it never quite gets everything to the perfect state. Like, everything's always a little bit wonky and off and in flux, so to speak, you know?
Maybe throughout the day, it has like different angles, and then maybe even these kind of, I really like this curved wall. If it's like becoming horizontal, maybe it's
right, exactly, yeah.
sort of like a skateboard or playground for children. Maybe there's like the time changes, where in the, you know, in the afternoon it becoming something a playground, but in the morning it becoming a wall to block the water or whatever. I don't know, something that changed the climate or the functionality of it, and then to create something that natural and not natural, or I don't know.
That's an interesting thought. I haven't quite thought about that, but definitely.
Well, yeah, and even, you know, if you think about ruins, there are, you know, ruins have columns, you know, tilted down on the floor horizontally, right? So.
But this project always reminds me of the project of Aldo Rossi, Il Teatro del Mondo, which is this floating theater that somehow changes its appearance. First of all, because it floats, so there's something quite interesting about the fact that you see it and then it goes away, but also because it's a place of performance, and it changes the performance and therefore changes its interior. And so I thought maybe also we need to understand this in terms of theatricality. and the idea that the spectacle has its duration, has quite an effort to get there, and it's quite engineered in its every night, and that there is still some structure that the theater has to have. I mean, even that theater, Teatro del Mondo, was, even though it was made in wood and it was on platforms and floated around Venice, it still had some physicality to it, something that remained while the interior changed and the performance changed and even its location changed. I don't know, I think there is something quite attractive about being able to get to that soft spot between the monumental and the ephemeral and have that theatricality happen in the city and sparkle the imagination. I'm not sure that everything should go away with the flood. I think it's okay to have something that remains. And I think this land also is not really that it exists. They actually made this land happen. So I think they moved a lot of dirt to make this piece of land happen. And I think becomes interesting both on the point of view of the environment. This is an environmental piece of land that is supposed to, protect the city from the floods. And I think what you do in this 100 years waiting for that flood and for the performance of the land, which is really to stop the flood, that's what the project will do. The land itself will do that. But what happens within that time between the moment of the infrastructure is built and the moment where the infrastructure is activated, which maybe is very far apart. I mean, hopefully it never happens, but it's 100 years. Instead of building walls around every major monument or infrastructure in New York, you create this piece of land that somehow does that so that you can live differently your life in the city. So I think there's something quite interesting about the project also in terms of functionality. I mean, I don't know if there are many projects, to construct walls around the major hospital in New York, the major infrastructure in New York, to really avoid this kind of catastrophe. And this, on the other hand, this landscape allows a buffer between the flood and the buildings. And it really creates this place for ephemerality, I think, but still being a very public space.
Any final comments? Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sri, I have one real quick thing.
Oh,
yeah. I just wanted to mention, you're struggling for a precedence. There is a great Zago project, and it was a competition entry. It was all made out of bamboo, and the idea was that it creeped down, it kind of deconstructed itself or fell apart into a coral reef. So it was an opera house built out kind of in a jetty, and it's great. It collapses over time, becomes a coral reef. So.
Oh, cool. Thank you.
Okay, next.
Yeah, hi.
Yes, hi, you're next.
My name is Phoempphol. I will sharing screen now. Yes, good afternoon. My name is Phoemphoolsinchai. Today I'm gonna present my graduate thesis project. My project name is City X, Self-Sufficient Smart City. The question that comes to my mind when I'm thinking about the design of future city is what is the main concern that right now we have, and how we as the designer can solve and decide to put into the new city that I will show in the project. So for sure, the new that has been presenting in every day about the climate change, and many cities in the world try to find and solve the final solution to treat the environment and growing the city better. And the next is about the food security crisis is another choice that we are facing right now. By the 2050, the world is headed for the food security crisis. According to the World Economic Forum, at the population of 9.8 billion, our food supply will be under far greater stress. The demand will be 60% higher than it is as today. And especially during right now about the harmful crisis about the virus, we have create more crisis after the virus spreads. The food security is more powerful during this time also. No food living in supermarket. The supermarket workers are in the harmful zone. But in contrastingly, the online service is become more greater than offline service. Most people order food and supply with the smartphone and wait them to delivery. So this is like the totally big change of our lifestyle from the crisis that we happen right now about the food and about the transportation and so on. So our lifestyle is like change to become to they call like a new normal, that the people stay home, wear the mask, have the social distance, and something more about this situation. To prepare for the future crisis, build with the global sustainable self-sufficiency will be the critical to solving this food security crisis and the new normal lifestyle. And the question that comes to mind is why do not we desire a city that can produce the food by itself and serve all residents instead of wait the food that is imported from the another city? And also, why don't we decide a city that can produce the food by itself is same? That is like the question that happen. So to solve this food crisis that we are facing right now, the City Act is forcing to combine the agriculture and the architecture while keeping up the changing technology to sustainably protect food supplying sufficient to feed everyone. And moreover, this city can completely clean themselves by using new technology and innovation. It's like the social responsibility. Before we let something out of the city, we make sure the thing that's out of the city is not have harmful or effect to the neighbor or somewhere else. So we go next to the 5 factor that people living that I forgot on. So yes, people for sure, we need the food, we need the clothing, we need the furniture, and we need the energy. So for the outcome that we take back is sure we need to clean the waste and something else. And all of that is the 5 key that I'm focused, and I developed this one and how to serve the food, serve the energy, and also clean the waste in the city completely. So I will go detail for this one later. So and the main 7 key principle that is in this city is gonna be the one is a net zero energy. The second is the urban farm. The third is sharing mobility. The fourth is a sharing culture. And the 5th is a smart city. And the 6th is a zero waste system. And the last is the modular construction. So this is the system of the city that is run in the city. It's completely fully finished by themselves. We don't need to take some catalog or some thing from out of the city. And if we can produce more, we can share to others also. And next, I'm gonna move to talk about the site location. The site location that this city will be built is on the China. The China announced the establishment of the Shenzhen new area. Its size about 500 kilometers from the southwest Beijing, and it's close to Beijing and Hebei City. And this is the location of the new location of the China that they're gonna publish. And this is a transportation that the China, they're gonna have some new train and the road on the map also. And this is for the water quality. The site is very close to the biggest lake in the China. So that is named Bayendian Lake. It's a good location that we can pay and think about how we can combine the waste space with the people living. So next, I'm going to present of the step to build the city. This is the site location. This is the original site right now. You can see this have the big lake under the site, and to increase the function and plant the tree, we need to have the river. So I mean, we need to have the water. So we cut we dig the land to get the river. So that every square meter in the site will get the water. And after that, we build the infrastructure of the city. This city will have the fully finished with the infrastructure like the water system, the construct wetland, the energy system, the waste system, and the transportation path. In this city, we present to design without the road. Instead of the road, we use the belt conveyor. It's like the new way right now that we don't need to drive the car to the supermarket. We just order some things from the online, and the food will be go to your door. Was the system of the AI and the computer that no people drive the car to delivery you, right? Same as now. So for the top of that, we build on top with the harvest floor. It is the main concept. That's this project is to have much as green space for the agriculture. And after that, we build the real path transit. This to reduce the hardscape and to make the convenience of the people in the city. Each station is have the diameter about 500 meters, so people don't need to walk far away to go to the station closest for them. And the lastest is we build the architecture. In this city, we have the many architecture on top, but they develop in the three zoning. The first, this is closer to the station. It will be like a commercial building zone, and the next is a mixed use between the resident and the commercial, and the last is the resident with the green space and the farming. This is the detail of the first floor that you can look the detail in the website that I will give you later. This one is the top floor of the planning that we'll see the space of the green space and the space of the living and the space of the agriculture. I already give you the link, so you can go check the link of my website. Let's move to my website. You can see what I have, or you can pay it on yourself. So if you go into my website, you can see this is like the detail of the city. So basically for the transportation, as I told you, the transportation will be use the rail path and the bus, and also the sharing scooter or sharing some mobility as our key point. And in the middle of the land, we will have some clean space that is for the agriculture, like the harvest farm, and also the filter of the cleaning the water, and also the farming, the urban farm that we have the crowd to produce the milk and the dairy product, and also the chicken tower that they can produce the egg and the meat also. is also in the middle land of the city. So this like the people can get the fresh egg and the fresh meat direct from their own farm. And under the resident, we will have the warehouse. It's like the main main building to sharing all things of the city. Like it's a space for the city that people can order, and the food and the thing is really come from this. And also in the resident, we have to share the space for the plant, the vegetable, and the food that people don't need to go to the supermarket or something as today. They can go to the next door to get the vegetable and come back to cook, or go to relaxing in the green space. That is our goal. And if you go to the system that I have in the city, so for the food production, we have the aeroponic, hydroponic, livestock, fish, honey, and the greenhouse. This is also combined in this city. And for the water management, we have the big construct wetland that is can clean the water, the wastewater from our household using, to reuse it again, or to return to the nature. By the way, the way to clean it, we use the grass. So the grass is can use for the cow that they can eat it. So it's like a win-win situation of this system. And also the treatment of the soil, that is we can get the water disappear directly from the land. And for the energy system, we have the solar energy, the wind turbine, the heat exchange, the water flow generator. This is like the completely get the energy direct from the clean energy. And for the another thing that is important that we can get from the livestock is the waste animal, the animal waste that is people can get this one to do the biogas. So this is to run the energy from the biogas also. And for the waste management, we try to find the final solution about the sharing together, like a sharing culture. Because right now, when you not use anything, you just throw it away. But actually, the thing that you throw it away is can be the thing that another person will looking for. Like when you have the children, you buy the toy for the children, but when the children growing up, the toy is no value, so you throw it away. But the toy, that's one you can share to the another family who just have the toy. So this is like the station that can reduce the waste by have the tower, and then they can ship the not using product to this station, and they clean, and the station will sharing to the another person. For the another hazardous waste return, we also have like the drone submitting, like you just waiting in the house and you call the drone, and the drone come to pick up the hazards, and they're gonna go take to the facility. And another thing that I'm found is the green cone solar digester. This one is like the thing that when you finish to eat, or when you finish to do something about the bio wasting, so you just take this one to the this system, and they will use the nature to clean it, because like that is a very good vitamin for the tree. So this is the system that in this city. And let's move on. The last thing is the zoning of the house. I mean, the zoning of the city. This is the zoom in of the mixed-use high-rise that is have the city on top of the sanitary floor, and this is the railpath transit station that is the hub station that is two line is cross together, and this one is like the public plaza that people can come to have some event here. This is the main city control station. All facility and all product it will be shipped from this. Watch the belt conveyor go to your door, and this is agriculture in the middle of the city that we have the river that we just cut the new one, and the water can treat all the tree here, and the tree will be shipped. Watch the belt conveyor to your door also. This is the urban farm on top that the farm needs to have the space that easy to have the wind and also the sun go to. And under of this is also the sanitary floor. This is the school of this city, because of we try to find the final right now that we don't need to go to school and we can learning from the home. So this one is just like the school that just for the meeting, big meeting, or do some special event like the game show or the sport club. Because of the we can learn at home. So this school is not the as school right now that we have. And this is the hospital and the sports center that, yes, people need to have the exercise. So we have this one, and also the clinic to help them sometime that they need to meet the doctor. And this is the underground waste management that we have the all facility that to clean before take that out of the city. And this is the water management that we use the construct wetland to soak the gray water to be the clear water and reuse it again. And this project is gonna present to the Venice Biennale season. It is the research project for inventing design concept and create proposal for the city of Shenzhen, new area in the China. It will be launched in next year. Yes. So thank you.
Can I just make a quick suggestion for next time? Maybe shorten the presentation a bit, like make it more concise. I think there's probably some things in there you don't need to go into so much detail of. That was a long presentation.
Yeah, sorry.
It's actually it's amazing how the amount of work that creating these kind of graphics and all the systems, and it's amazing that I actually really enjoying the presentation. But can you actually describe your project in 2 sentences?
The project 2 sentences is just like a design the future city that is self-sufficient and equal to the world. That's it.
Okay. And what this platform that you are creating is for people to play it as a gaming or how?
Yes. For the final, I feel I'm gonna do the gaming and the video presentation.
That's just like representational technique. That has nothing to do with the actual city project itself, or does it?
It's not do the actual city project.
Right.
I mean, I have to commend the work, because the amount of work that Phoemphol has been doing is impressive. I mean, I think there are 2 aspects of the project. One is the graphic quality, and one is the project itself. I mean, the project itself to take on is very difficult as usual, is to create something else in terms of an ideal city in a place that probably Stephen knows more than anybody else, since he's calling us from Shenzhen. And so he understands what the issues of Chinese cities are, maybe more than us. But I think clearly also there is another project here, which is the project of representation and how to start expressing the complexity a city in a way that is conducive to a diagram, because you kind of have to be a diagrammatic person when it goes to creating a new city and making synthesis of principles that should better the social life. And then on the other hand, still keeping them to be a sense of livelihood. So I think that that is the work that these diagrams do. I think it also almost challenges the idea of how to do urban planning that has not only volumes and square footage and RFI, but has also qualities to them. So I think it needs to somehow, it suggests that one should think about urbanism as in between three-dimensional model and a diagram, which I think becomes interesting in this project. It's almost like a map of how would you imagine the new urbanists to be equipped to have these tools to explain their projects. So I interrupted somebody that wanted to speak.
But so is the thesis more in the representation of it?
I don't think so. I think he went through the motions of doing the entire project. I think the representation, though.
I find the representation more compelling than the actual project, like the actual city proposal. I mean, I think there's a lot of things left, like in terms of the technical engineering stuff. There's just stuff that's outside our expertise to understand these things. But it's funny because I mean, it made me think, and I think I mentioned this on the previous review. Like I was, in terms of agriculture, I think it's an interesting problem, like agriculture and urbanism, right? And it reminded me again that Holland is the world's second largest food exporter, right? And that's an astounding fact, given how tiny they are.
What? Biggest food exporter in the world.
What's that?
I was just sharing that information with someone in the room.
Oh,
so
okay. And and it's through technology. It's basically just big box, just like a kind of server farm, and it's just highly engineered, So there's really there's nothing odd about the architecture other than the sheer engineering feat of it inside one of these big kind of warehouses, right? So I think like when I think about urbanism and agriculture coming together, what I see we propose is the grid, like a certain type of modernist layout, is still predominant. It dominates everything, So I see it more as agriculture is kind of injected into this system, this kind of modernist system of laying out cities and the role of grids and all that. And so I don't know if it's more about how do you hide agriculture in the city, something like that. So I'm just looking for like, what is the rub of the thing that we might understand cities in the way that you're proposing them, that allows us to see the representation, or to have the representation work in that way.
Yeah, this city is like because of, I feel like we right now, like LA, this one, we far from the farming and the food that we need to go to the supermarket and get it from the supermarket only. So I'm just thinking how it's possible that we can take over the farming to the big city and combine it, and like when you want to have the fresh vegetable,
right.
That is the main point that of this concept of the city. And then I just go forward to the how to make this city not affect to the neighbor, and then it's just go have the cleaning solution and the system to clean all things before they can go out of the city or have the problem later. That is like the key of this city. not have some problem at all for author person. We just finish ourselves and do it can say like maybe it will be similar to the North Korea, maybe that they can stand alone and have individual country, but actually in the real life it's impossible. We need to have connect to the other country. This is a similar, but not about the politics.
Steve, you're
muted, Stephen. If you're trying to.
Yes, sorry. I was asking the like, what was the last images that you have where the Biennale X City, like what was that? It was a research that you did.
It's a research project that.
So this project is actually started like earlier, or what exactly?
Actually, it should be presented to this year, but due to the COVID situation, so that's why the project, I mean the event moved forward to the next year. Yeah, it's a project that they communicate with the China government because of this city will be built for the realistic for the future. They're gonna build a new city in this location, and they just want to looking for the new idea.
Yes, so basically this brief was given also to universities, and Phoemphool selected this as his thesis, and he created his own version, let's say, of his response to the City X.
Is this Hong'an, I mean this location like in China, it's already like recently I just saw it like 2 weeks ago. There's like a real proposal of this site that came out from the China government. And it's super nice idea, and there's a lot of like thought to it. Have you seen that?
I didn't see it.
It just came out 2 weeks ago, like the entire master planning, how the agriculture and how all these infrastructure works, like for this real site.
Yes, it have like a not. I didn't see it for the update 2 weeks, but they used to have like the early for the last year, but I'm not sure that is the same as you tell, or they already launched the final one.
But it could be like some interesting things that you maybe take a look at it, and then maybe
I will go to search.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other comments? So you got to short your presentation next time. Leave more time for comments.
Sorry.
You know, the representation is beautiful. It's really, it's like I could just stare at it. It's like very soothing.
Thank you.
I wasn't even listening. I was just looking at the image, like how the cow moves and.
Well, if there's no other comments. Okay, great. Thank you, Phoemphool.
Thank you.
Okay, who's next?
Hi, I'm next. Let me just share my screen.
Okay, great.
Hi, I'm Sadvi, and my thesis is called Double Consciousness, and I'm working on it under the advisory of Elena Manferdini. The occurrence of a double is of more value than a standalone object. It substantiates the existence of the other by discerning self-identity. Twin buildings are a phenomenon that is evidence of duality. The relationship between the Vatican State and Italian taxes has been historically ambiguous and complicated. The reputation of the Vatican Bank has rumored associations with organized crime, alleged violations of both divine and common laws, including criminal embezzlement and money laundering. Extraterritorial land of the Vatican is exempted from the jurisdiction of the local Roman law. One of the twin buildings is situated in the extraterritorial Vatican property that shares a border with the Vatican City. It will house treasures of invaluable art, literature, archives, and bullion storage. Its access is restricted to the Vatican staff only. The other twin will house physical replicas, digital copies, and holographic images of these treasures, fully divulging undisclosed truths to the world. The existing buildings on the site have similar typologies with internal courtyards and will act as pedestals to the proposed twin buildings. Taking inspiration from Tom Friedman's process of replication, I have created almost identical twin building forms. The proposed building under the Vatican has been created with idiomatic materials of luxury, divinity, and opulence. The gilded mullions, extravagant marble, reiterate the historical glory of Catholicism. The autonomous building across the street espouses Rome's embrace of democracy and liberty, built with lightweight concrete, aluminum cladding, and steel mullions. The Vatican twin reflects inwards. Its artifacts are concealed within marble walls. Its circulation lies along the periphery of the form. The Roman twin, on the other hand, reflects outwards. It is accessible to all. Its artifacts are positioned such that the onlooker has perspective of its pertinence against the backdrop of the city. While the original artifacts are housed in the Vatican twin, its replicas are housed in the Roman twin. The gilded marble is a stark contrast from the grouted plaster and molds. The two buildings interact with each other with their materiality as well as orientation. Here are some of my, here are some photographs that I've hand painted for the midterm model. Thank you.
Are the buildings going to be labeled on the outside so that it's clear which one is the original and which one is the simulacrum, or do you want to leave that ambiguous at first?
I don't think it would be that ambiguous if you were actually there. There's like a stark contrast between its materials and its richness and luxury, and it would be quite clear which is which, I think.
Right. I'm reminded of Marcel Duchamp's Boîte en Valise, which is he made small toy versions of a number of his artworks, and you could carry them around in a little suitcase, and there were a limited number of those. You know, you familiar with this?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
What was this the design idea for this facade? Like, I mean, can you explain more?
Right. So I've been studying Tom Friedman's work and how he created replicas he created two almost identical objects by folding crumpled paper, two pieces of paper together, and it produces almost completely identical objects. And that was the inspiration for my facade. And as the project developed, I started giving it materiality, and I started asking questions of what is a how could I possibly replicate a material, or what that would mean in a social or political sense. And yeah, I guess that was my process.
The fact that you're doing it at the Vatican is pretty provocative, because the next step is to imagine a second St. Peter's with a fake Pope, simulacra of Mass. Somehow the uniqueness of the Vatican's authority, the one God and the one Pope, the bridge to God's bridge on earth. Just a mere suggestion of doubling near the Vatican is somehow politically very provocative.
Is the public allowed in both buildings?
No, so the public is
right.
only allowed in the on the Roman side, on the building that's in Rome, and you can. I've started to sort of develop plans that that show the openness of with respect to circulation and orientation, and how on the Vatican side everything is concealed and you're only circulating on the periphery, but it's only open to the Vatican staff. And whereas on the right hand Roman floor plan, it's all open, and the artifacts sort of have a backdrop of the city.
That's where all the copies are.
Right, and those are the replicas.
I mean, there's something really provocative in the images of the interior when you see, yeah, like those. I was wondering, like God, it would be amazing to be able to have access to both of those, you know, to be able to experience both of the interiors. But obviously, for reasons you can't. But I wonder if there's a way to somehow bring that into the project. I don't know exactly what that means, but.
Well, I think the project came a long way about a very simple observation that there is a phenomenon called the twin towers, twin buildings, that is not really symmetry. It's something deeper and happens at every level. In every city, you find a building that is a copy of itself next to it. And I think it came to a point of testing the grounds for what that two-ness is. And I'm using the word two-ness for a specific reason, because I think it's about the essence of the building or how the building is perceived and how they might be different, the exterior and the interior. I think that the site is provocative, the presence of the two is provocative. The fact that one is visible and one is not is provocative. I guess maybe from the jury, we could ask what is next for it, meaning that we can go into more refinement. Or, and I think maybe the presentation also needed to speak a bit more about the phenomenon of being two in buildings. But I'm actually curious about, Graham, your take, since it's kind of up your alley, I think, the description of the two and how they stay in relationship with each other and what that would mean in architecture.
Well, whenever you double something, you are tending to draw emphasis to the form rather than the content. And Jean Baudrillard is the philosopher who writes most about simulacra. French philosopher who died 10 or 15 years ago. He connects it to a kind of hyper-reality. And he also connects it to capitalism, by the way. He says that the most powerful form of the monopoly is the duopoly, when you have two things, because then it's a kind of pretend choice between two things that are exactly alike, like Pepsi and Coke, Doritos and Tostitos, or Democrat and Republican. That's the critique, that there's kind of hypnotic effect when you're simply doubling something. But in this case, we all know the phenomenon of identical twins, right? There's something hypnotic about encountering identical twins as well. But in this case, there's an obvious difference between the two sides. As Sadvi was emphasizing, she's not trying to leave it ambiguous. It should be fairly obvious which one is the Roman side and which one is the Vatican.
So are they two different? There should be more Tostitos or Doritos, however they are, or Pepsi and yeah.
Although it turns out that Doritos and Tostitos are owned by the same company, so it's even more of a lie. Profits go to the same place. Well, I like the fact that she's left some internal differentiation, because if they were really just twin towers and differed only spatially, then you've got a real problem on your hands. Is there a real difference if they're just in different locations but exactly the same? So I find this intellectually challenging on some level. And I do think the Vatican would never allow this, because they would understand the challenge to their authority that's implicitly contained here.
What if there are three? Would that be okay?
What's that?
What if there will be three? Would that be okay?
Oh, that's a trinity. They could interpret it that way.
Yeah.
I know, exactly.
You know, the sense that the Roman Catholic Church has the history with the anti-pope in Avignon, and there were two popes for a long time. It's going to trouble them deeply. For a bank, it might be perfect.
Why a bank could be perfect?
Oh, because Baudrillard says capitalism is the realm of simulacra. It's creating a kind of something that's a hyper-real, a real that's more than real. The thing is both itself and also the thing is a commodity. On the one hand, Coca-Cola is just a can of sugar water. On the other hand, it's a commodity that seems to have a kind of magical power over and above that. Architecturally, of course, you've all mentioned the Twin Tower phenomenon. Has that ever happened in such close proximity and such dangerous symbolic proximity to a seat of authority of any kind? I mean, the US Capitol has two wings, but that's because we have a two-house legislature. Are they positioned completely symmetrically? I can't tell.
No, they're on a different axis.
Okay.
Yeah.
Again, I like that, because if they were perfectly symmetrical and perfectly identical, then you're back in the realm of modernism. This gives us something to chew on.
Maybe she's done and just hang out for a month.
For some reason, I don't think that will happen. Anyway, thank you for your feedback, Graham. It was really appreciated. I kind of wanted to hear your feedback to see how we move forward. But anyway, congratulations, Sadvi. I mean, you've done a lot of work, and I think it's a provocative thesis, so we'll find a way to move it forward.
I'll be curious to see where it goes from here.
Right. Do you think that focusing on focusing on the human experience would be more productive, or focusing on what possibly curating the artifacts and understanding how each thing could be replicated possibly could be productive?
And maybe flesh out the visitor's experience a bit more. I just noticed, is this actually taller than the Dome of St. Peter's?
No, it's not.
Oh, it's
and
not?
It's not allowed to be as well.
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah, I'm not sure what else to work on. Well, models? Are you gonna do I mean, these are, I take it like study models.
I mean,
Yeah.
Is there
Would be different media? I don't know.
and maybe it's more about presentation.
Yeah.
Not sure what else you can develop on it.
I mean, I think the interior probably and the experience and what is accessible and what is not, and to really develop that as I think would help the argument in general, and those interiors and develop that experience more. But I think also, yeah, we'll see what to do with the model, if a larger model with the interior would work. Anyway, so thank you guys. Thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, Andrew.
Hey, Cool Ranch Vatican sounds fun. Okay, I'll share my screen. Does everyone see my cover? Curbed appeal? Great. Okay. Okay, so the title of my thesis is Curbed Appeal, a proposal for the zombie subdivision. Okay. My slide's not switching, sorry, just real quick. Sorry, it's not changing for some reason. Okay, here we go. Okay, so curbed appeal. This comes kind of from the notion of curb appeal. Curb appeal, if you're not familiar, kind of refers to the image of the typical single family home from the vantage point of the street. And it's a notion that's kind of historically represented the status of the individual or individuality with respects to the home and property. And it's since evolved into a term that's used more to evaluate kind of the economical potential of a house through the cultivation of the natural and built environment, really. So in order to kind of address curb appeal, I kind of broke it down to a conventional totality, which is comprised of frontality, which is kind of the single frame, single vantage point from the curb, in terms of privacy, in terms of how it occupies the site, and a clear cutting of the site, usually with this frontality or this conventional totality. An accessibility thing with the garage, and the garage being kind of this status symbol and usually kind of having almost more hierarchy than the house itself in some cases, and a tectonic issue. A tectonic that's typically disengaged with the site. And when I say tectonic, I particularly mean the stick frame. The stick frame is something that has kind of flattened all typologies. You see it existing across all building types, really. And I was on the right here, you'll see a zombie subdivision. I was interested in the subdivision in general in terms of what houses do in terms of an aggregate or a neighborhood. And I was intrigued by the zombie subdivision because it's a colloquial term that refers to this arrested development of these subdivisions. They end up concluding in these kind of skewed development patterns that damage ecosystems and fiscally cripple communities. But I'm interested in them for their the kind of rewilded site. The rewilded site with still this conventional grid over it. So it still retains a certain property, or retains something, I guess you'd say. So curbed appeal is the denial of those kind of conventional totalities that I talked about, kind of systematically going through and denying frontality, denying the typical sense of what constitutes privacy, accessibility, and tectonic. And also what so here on the right, then you can see how these new models kind of start to inhabit the site of difference, and it's kind of a concluding image, an aerial view of the inhabitation of that site with curbed appeal. Okay, so I said the beginning of this totality was frontality. How I approached the project was first by denying this global form or this global mass, the cube that you kind of see transition right into the home itself. And how could I start to, I wanted to use a kind of paneling system, a CLT paneling system. If you're not familiar with it, it's these kind of large laminated panels of timber. And it was a good way to think in planes instead of frames or boxes, and a good way to jump off and manipulate them in order to deny this frontality and start to create a difference that might inform either program or occupation of the site, really. And you'll also see kind of these rewilded sites in their existing form and how some of these, my last iterations occupy those sites. Here is my miniature model in terms of just the CLT itself, the whole relationship, trying to deny a frontality, but still retaining some sense of mass. When it comes to privacy, privacy was kind of a situation of orientation. When I started to develop these models, I started to kind of generate difference in terms of height and in terms of openness. As you rotate these models, they go from open to closed, and that really informed how they might create a set of characteristics that can go on and occupy these individual properties. And then go ahead and proliferate into each individual difference, and not necessarily like a privacy sense, not looking into each other. How can they all kind of embrace a vastness without looking into each other to some degree, and sensibly occupy this existing subdivision, this zombie subdivision typology. Here's kind of my midterm model. It's really maybe more a camouflage model of how, well, I haven't gotten to that yet, but really just orientation of the projects on the site and how they occupy the site of variation. Accessibility was a question of just the garage itself. How, once you start making these models, how does it reincorporate the garage without clear cutting the site and then kind of fit into the model itself? And another thing was, you know, there's a sense of individuality with these driveways. So how can they each individually be like tactically handled by the project itself? So I just want to say, when it came to putting these in, I kind of started with how the projects orient on the site, but then you start to mirror and push and pull them in order to accommodate the garage. It's kind of getting in the weeds. Here's kind of a larger integration of what's happening at a floor level in terms of that hidden garage effect. Tectonically, I wanted to create a project that was a little bit more a relationship between an untethered and tethered relationship between kind of existing parts. So you kind of here see the stick frame or white space, which would be kind of sheetrock reincorporated, and then the CLT panel of the green and red, and this kind of planar sensibility that really defines the space, and then all the supplementary tectonics kind of tether or untether from it, which really helps create a spatial situation that helps really absorb the site. And these different houses can kind of occupy all the higher canopies and lower canopies understory and really accommodate these sites of difference. Here's kind of just an example of that. Another thing is the kind of domain of the house. I want to talk about here real quick how I'm kind of integrating a little bit of the drawing form. You see a lot of diagram, but I'm really trying to integrate that into the literal qualities of the house, because I want to use the drawing to kind of create an artifice layer over the house in order to really maybe manipulate color, or even the kind of stick frame itself, how it might create a new sense of boundary or identity. It becomes untethered from its usual hidden nature, and now maybe starts to become a new fence or a new sense of individuality. And then here's kind of projects a little bit in their composite. This is just an isolated set of 4. And then this is kind of a final image that is a bit at the crux of my thesis, because it's about how do you retain a personal domain, but then there's also a visual shared wilderness in these zombie subdivisions, that it's not about acquiring a bunch of land in order to create this vastness, but that you can have it right there in your immediate situation. So curved appeal kind of eliminates the typical signs of curb appeal while retaining a sense of personal domain. Let me stop sharing.
What in this project addresses the factors that led the subdivisions to become zombie in the first place?
It was land entitlements, post-World War II land entitlements, and interestingly enough, particularly in Florida, Florida went hog wild with all of this in the Everglades. And so you have these kind of subdivisions that weren't abandoned in 2008, but actually abandoned in the 90s. So they got to kind of, they really actually got to be rewilded. That's what kind of creates the phenomenal effect of these sites that kind of create a new egalitarian nature.
Is placing these structures in the rewild areas going to make it harder for animals to re-inhabit these sites?
Well, no. I mean, because in terms of how they touch the ground, they tippy-toe. There's a big, if you see in some of the models, they deny the ground. You know, so it's about, I mean, I think by denying the conventional totality of houses, you're kind of inherently allowing that raw precision of nature re-entering domesticated life. That's kind of, I want to recreate that entanglement of the wild and the cultivated. So hopefully animals are there, you know.
That's kind of a selling point of the project rather than
Sure.
Okay.
Are the buildings like AI generated approach, or what exactly, like the design approach for those buildings? I mean,
oh yeah, so no, it was
like
simply from the kind of
manually modeling, or like what's the constraint on it?
Yeah, it was manually modeled. So I would get into the weeds to explain it, but it really started from what's the structural integrity of the CLT. So how do the CLT boxes kind of move from a global position to a local position? And in fact, that creates an interlocking or a structural proposition now, but they can break off into pieces that actually become program itself too. They don't remain just huge chunks of panels. They kind of they're actually broken up based on their structural kind of entropy. That's why they kind of result in a bit of a cacophony as you start to manipulate them from into a kind of weaker form as they get bent around. So,
because I was trying to read trying to read the form, like how you generate it, and then I can't really understand how it actually. I mean, you have so many different forms, and then it actually quite interesting. And I thought it was an AI generative approach where you have some sort of constraint or whatsoever, and yeah, it's very nice in a way, and I just wondering, like, I couldn't really read the relationship between the site and the buildings, like with the trees. And
it's not so much that they have they don't inform themselves. It's more that you're creating a situation that can embrace this amount of difference. So it kind of fits and tiptoes into the site. It's kind of designed without the site in mind. It's more just the sensibility of the site in terms of higher canopies and lower canopies and understory. But I'll show you this slide here because it really is, it was just simply, how do you recreate a more local condition to where they notch into themselves, hold themselves, and then you kind of mind their notching points and then flip back into it. You flip the panels back into themselves in order to generate programs. So the exterior kind of folds back into the interior, and they really create just, they create sets with characteristics.
Don't get me wrong. I think I like it. I really like the way that how you designing this, and it's actually quite cool. And then, but what about your take in the interior? Are you gonna do more exploration to the interior of the building, like to make like one sample of it, or how does that work from the exterior?
Yeah. I would say that, you know, when it came to these sets that I developed, these 4 sets, I thought about them in terms of, are they more wrapping around and maybe they kind of vary from my idea of what a single family home might be to a more kind of tucked in, nested ADU quality. Or
I think he's just asking.
Oh, go ahead.
Like, are you going to take one of these and develop it more so we can understand how the interior plays out?
Yes. And so, I mean, they do create interior compositions that are kind of more shredded apart and kind of infused and absorb the nature around it. I'm showing you this is just one platform. So usually the house consists of 3 platforms or 3 sets of this. And it's a relationship between the stick framing, the CLT panel, and then the white space. And this is what I'm manipulating in order to create interior. I mean, I don't know if you can kind of see how the spaces start to work out here. It kind of more tunnels through the site, kind of tunnels through itself.
So you're still planning, right? Like to do the interior. I mean, that will be something that you will be doing in the next 2 weeks or so.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I mean, I don't have many cut floor, but I think these floor plans might show how the interiors are, have been thought about and working out.
And what is this curvature that related to? I mean, all your form and, is this very like, straight lines and angles, and what is this curve? Like
that's just the driveway pulling into the site. It's just kind of more the radius of a car. I mean, nothing. No, I could draw a spline
like above the tree, or are they under? I mean, are they on the ground?
No,
right?
they're on the ground. And really, what I looked for is kind of. It's more like there are inlets. I mean, the trees aren't totally taking over. There's kind of these paths and inlets. So what I did was, you have this kind of shape of the garage, and you're kind of working that into the house. And then you kind of flip the house in orientation in order to kind of accommodate that curving drive. I mean, I was just worried about hiding the garage, and how do you get back to it sensibly and kind of missing the trees along the way. So the idea was that they kind of retain this orientation. And
I mean, that image is, I think it's interesting because it somehow it just break the project a little. I mean, it just added a little bit of more interesting stuff to it, because you can actually imagine this actually drive not on the ground. Maybe it actually suited into the building in the midway, or something above the tree, or something that elevated. Just like something in in LA, the school from Cooper Blau, where the iconic sort of like iconic like rams or something that break the the normal, like I don't know. There's something interesting about this one, which I found.
Okay. Yeah, I guess the play here was more just to hide it. And how does the angularity of the house, or how are there certain qualities of the house that kind of they lend themselves to hiding the garage? There's kind of areas you can slip in. There's a breakage in the house and a breakage in the forest that you kind of try to find that happy medium. So the play was just to simply hide the garage. And then I think what's lovely about the driveways is there's not a coexisting quality to it. They're all individual. Everybody has their own driveway. As open as I want everything to be, I want to retain that property.
Can I see the images where you have all the buildings onto on the zombie land or whatever, that subdivision?
Sure.
Yeah, this one. Okay. Can you zoom in a little bit?
Yes.
I'm more like a formal guy, and then when I see these images here, I would like to see more layering of it, where how the driveway kind of go into these buildings, not just these kind of houses that just situated in it, and then I don't know, something that can improve maybe the graphics or the presentation of the project.
Sure. Yeah. Does it seem like maybe that's kind of where this is kind of leading in terms of kind of fitting in that how I've just been working diagrammatically into a literal quality of the house as like, you know, I'm just kind of working through these tectonics, and it's maybe this is the paint layer, or this is like the framing might actually have a pinstripe on it or a color, in order to add variation. Just kind of
cool. I mean, it's a good project, I think.
Hey, Andrew, I really like the, quite apart from the tectonic aspect of the project, I like the urban design aspect. I gave you some joke there to kind of, as I thought about the implications of some of the things you were saying. I love type-driven urban design like strategies to underlie what you're doing on the rest of a project. And so I think, yeah, here you're doing something that actually has roots, but it has roots in the kind of projects that are usually rural, resort compounds with a number of like individual, sorry, my kids are being a little loud, with a number of individual units, and because they're in the country, no one wants to see each other. I think of like Tuxedo Park, where the tuxedo was invented as one of these kind of out near New York City, that where no one wanted to see each other, and so they would have this kind of, the frontality would go away because no one was ever meant to see those houses except for very like personal guests of the family, and so you'd get these kind of like trying to hide in the woods, beautiful, often like really, so some of the architecture, for instance, in Tuxedo Park is some of the best of that generation in the United States. The Bruce Post's houses there are unbelievable. But I think that that chance when you're in kind of hiding, especially hiding wealth in the woods, you can to do stuff that goes against the codes of the typology, right? You're not voicing the street, you're not giving people yards, you're not separating off spaces like that, you're not answering this kind of insistent frontality. And so I like all those strategies because I think that it gives you a setting to really make the architecture of the individual buildings pay off. But that said, I think the architecture of the individual buildings right now is hanging together very closely as a set, where it doesn't really matter how many members of that set there are. There could be 100, there could be 6. It would still be the same project. And I'm not sure that that's the best outcome for the strategies that you're putting into place. Like I'd like to see the kind of like undifferentiated greened out zombie block. I don't think is it has. Oh, sorry, I stopped.
Fine. I'm just curious. So, is Eric? Are you saying almost to go even more ad hoc in a way to kind of?
I just want to see what's the sense on the grouping? Why are there this many? Like in a way, you're doing the kind of like the zombie block or the green block in Detroit. Like is a bit of an easy out. Like you need to know where. Like why are there this many? What's the scale? What's it like? Like, do these people ever actually come across each other? Is it meant that they don't ever? And in which case they should really be further apart. Like how do we, before we get a chance to appreciate building as a building, like how do we come into this whole place and see it as something that's not what we thought would happen in this area, right? Like that. Yeah. That setup is already strong, but you could make it even stronger enough so that we know what to expect on those individual houses.
Right, yeah, because Eric, I really, I don't mean for this to be some sort of ex-urban fantasy land. I mean, the reason that I chose this subdivision was its proximity to the city or the type of freedoms that gives, that you're not, that might be kind of a new sensibility of millennials or something like that. You kind of, you don't necessarily.
Yeah, no, I think it's the fact, like it matters that not doing it in this kind of, it's not a retreat. It's meant to be,
right.
Because then it wouldn't matter that you were avoiding the frontality and putting in the woods, right? That you're trying to create something that is like green yards and little fences around everything, and that can occupy a similar space, but in a very different feel as a possible world. Really, it's really an urban world that you're proposing here. That's why it can't go further into the country. I get that. I like that. I want to see a little more of like the framing that justifies when we get inside, because right now the moves can be totally free and can have their own language, because we don't know enough about the framing to know whether or not one or another thing pays off better.
Do you think,
yeah, that's all.
Do you think scale has anything to do with it, Eric?
Scale totally can have to do with it. I think like just set up the story. Sorry. My daughter wants to see the screen.
She wants to say something.
Set up the story. She often has comments, and my son too. Set it up so that you know it gives you things to play against, and gives you payoffs that you might otherwise like not. Otherwise you're working in a vacuum, and you're setting yourself up with a back that allows your work to not exist in a vacuum, but actually to have payoffs against the urban framework that you're setting up.
Yeah, great. Yeah, that's good feedback. Great, thanks. Any other comments? All right, great. All right, thanks, Andrew. All right, Blake. Blake's going to finish us off here.
I'm very interested to hear more.
Can you guys see my screen? All right, so my project is fabricated landscapes, and this project
Can't quite hear you so well.
So my project is fabricated landscapes, and this project starts off in Lafayette Park in Los Angeles. And the thing I find interesting about this park is both programmatically, it has a whole range of civic programs, as in like a superior court, as well as municipality multi-purpose community centers, recreational centers, and an art center and a library, and also like a plaza. So it's interesting in that regard. But then in the design of the project site, it has intrinsic qualities that kind of give it more of like a terrain aspect, like such as the way the courthouse sits on the ground. It sits on these like folded stilts, and then also like where some of this like plaza dips below the street level, gives it an interesting aspect, and then also like a sheared wall from the pedestrian street. So I wanted to explore and exemplify these qualities through means of terrain samplings. So I started to sample imagery from terrains from Google Maps, and then using a height map generator. And then I started to develop a way of manipulating the height maps, and then also using the diffuse maps to change the colorations to kind of develop a machine terrain. So here's a few examples of that. So taking these and then setting them within the site, I wanted to kind of like scale these up and more or less use the same qualities of the existing site, but then exemplify it through this. So I developed this one terrain in which could host all of the program inside, but then also have moments where in this elevation that's unfolded throughout the site, which this black line would be the existing street level, but then it dips below, then also comes up below, continues to be more public on some levels as well. So I wanted to like add some programmatic elements that could be used to manipulate the terrain and add some architectural elements towards the surface texture of the terrain. So this track is used to tether the programs together, and also push and pull the surface throughout the terrain. And also taking some of the qualities of the sampling and then kind of exemplifying them, and then they will become like bridging or some type of other quality of the project. As for the elevation, so the site, where the site cuts the terrain, it kind of leaves this hard-lined edge that gives a feel of like a silhouette of a mountain. So I wanted to exemplify that using like a dark mirrored glass to reflect the city, but then also have this silhouette effect. And here's just more images of the track and how that intervenes throughout the program. And then I also started to like manipulate the surface by cutting some of these elements and then implementing some architectural elements like a skylight. And yeah, and that's all.
Have we lost our jurors? Stephen, there's Graham.
No, I'm here. I just couldn't hear because I don't know why I lost the voice before, so I couldn't hear what he said. Now I'm okay here. Hold on.
Okay.
So I mean I didn't hear the first thing. I mean, so this building is what, is a adventure park or is a amusement park, or what's the program?
It hosts so the existing program of Lafayette Park is a Superior Court, a public library, a recreation center, and a community center, and also an art center. So kind of taking the existing program and then reappropriating
Public library, recreation center, okay.
And reappropriating that within the new terrain. So then also like there's also a visual hierarchy throughout the site. So the Superior Court dominates the site because it's massive tower compared to the libraries. So the terrain also helps to visually disperse the program throughout the site.
Who is the architect of the project right now? It's a real project, isn't it?
The art center, I think, is under construction. I don't know the architect.
I mean, the existing building, the existing complex, or specifically the courthouse?
The courthouse. Oh, was just curiosity.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Can I see some street level perspective? Like I just saw some.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a very interesting project. Like I mean, it's somehow the presentation or the graphics or the renderings that doesn't show the quality of the project, where these kind of like mirror finish that reflecting the city, which make it, you know, entirely disappear in a way. I think it's more about, I mean, it's a cool project, it's a cool idea, and it could be a really interesting project if you nail down the presentation and the rendering quality of it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think it's something very different, and I couldn't imagine how I would design something like this, but I mean, it's actually quite nice. It reminds me of a museum that I saw a long time ago, where the entire museum was a mirror glass finish that actually disappeared into the city, that you don't actually see the building, but you're actually seeing the, you know, the reflectiveness of it, and which is really, really cool. and then somehow you can see from these gaps where there are activities in between, and then the way that you're making the mountains and stuff, and to make it like more three-dimensional and make more space to it, generating these kind of interior space. Originally was all exterior, that you're creating like a new ground for sort of like a new plane on top, which I don't know if it's accessible or not, but yeah, I see it as a playground for the public, which you add on like a whole new program to it, where you add a lot more space to it, which improving the site. I mean, improving the entire area of the zone or this district. So I think it's a very cool approach. Can I see some more views? I think it just get me excited when I asked, like, what is it a amusement park or something that I think you can kind of add into like an additional program instead of
I mean, it's fun. No, I think it's funny, Stephen, that that question, is it an amusement park? I mean, I guess we could think of that as signaling a couple of different things, like programmatically, like taking a civic center, so to speak, like a civic space that has courthouse, library, recreation center, and turning it into something that is, in a sense, more of a capitalist notion of a park, right? Amusement park kind of thing. But the other one, I think, is, does it, and it's a slippery slope with this kind of project, because it can quickly become kitsch, right? Like, I think when you said that, like what comes to my mind and what I look at a lot is Disneyland, the Matterhorn, right? Like a kind of a scaled down copy of some natural sublime thing out there, but because it references it so closely and scaled down, it takes on a different kind of aesthetic expression. And so I think like that's one thing that I wonder about with this, is like how much should the original imagery of the terrain be left intact, both in terms of the coloring, texture, all that, as well as the kind of formation of it. And like, I don't know if you mentioned about like the landscaping, the vegetation.
Oh yeah, so since sampling this terrain is more of like a desert, it's from the Baja Peninsula of Mexico. I wanted to kind of implement more of a bizarre type of vegetation that wouldn't exist in that sense. Like, this is all the vegetation I could get hands on for today. I want it to be more like either like rainforest or some other type of tropical stuff that wouldn't exist in this like barren landscape. So it'd be like a bizarro, like interesting play on the vegetation versus the imagery of the terrain.
One thing I want to say is about, maybe that's something that is diagonal to the conversation, but I think the texture mapping being stretched is a big part of, is there a theme park? I mean, because it just reminds us of the low-res theme park mountains that also they don't do it now, but at some point, like, that is made out of paper, and I think I would make a decision if that is what you're looking for, or this needs just to be worked on more to be much more realistic, or does it want to go that way? Because right now it does, but I don't know if it's intentional. And I think that the decision making should be taken, even how you cut out the mountain for the street to go in. There are certain moves that are declaring the digital quality of the model and the technique of mapping, and they remind us of certain tropes of theme parks that are even much more sophisticated. So I would say that you should own it if that's what it is and make an argument about it, or to put much more time in making it more realistic if that is the way to go. I'm not sure yet. I know which way Ramiro and you want to go with this.
To be honest with you, I really, really like the idea and the project, and it just add like a second value to the site, and like to generate like a new program. And I think you just need to spend more time on really developing the technique of showing the best out of the project. And then I could imagine that if I take this project, I can actually turn it into the best thesis. I mean, it's a really nice project, I would say, and it just needs to develop. I don't know. I mean, it's a very crucial in the next 2 weeks that you have to, really focusing on refining this to make it work.
Yeah.
Because I do really like this. I mean, it's new program, a new typology of buildings, and something interesting. Something really interests me on this project. So I don't know. But yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry, I just had such a hard time hearing your presentation. What is this, a street, or is this a running track, or what is this we're looking at now?
Yeah, it's a running track. So part of the program is a recreational center. So I wanted to kind of tie that and like use the track as to like tether the programs together, so it like intersects site.
And is the Superior Court still in there somewhere, or is that gone?
No, I just wanted to like this terrain is more like uniformly kind of spread out, so I wanted to like adopt or change the visual hierarchy throughout the site. So
I think the idea is that there's poche under and inside that the program would occupy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Well, make sure that you bring, I mean, to have some function on top of the building, how to bring people up and stuff, and then try to emphasize that a little bit more, because it's such a waste of terrain that you create like a really cool terrain, and then it's kind of useless on the top.
Okay, any last comments? Okay, great. That concludes mid-review. Thanks everyone. Thanks Graham, Stephen, and to all the students for presenting. Yeah, 4 weeks. A late midterm.
Whenever I blow my midterm, like I didn't present, like really, really bad, and then like I catch up in like a week. I mean, after it. So
right.
This is very crucial. The next week is very crucial. So
yes, I just want to thank all of the students for the work today and the jury as well. And yeah, 1 month more. And also thank Graham for being here. It's not always easy to get to give feedback on a discipline that is not yours, and it was actually nice to have a conversation about Tunis or a few things.
You should invite us to a philosophy mid-review.
Oh God,
yeah. If you want to have a really bad session.
Well, it's always like an intellectual workout to try to do architectural projects.
Well, thank you for the workout. I think it was especially probably useful for Sadvi, I think. So I was looking forward to that duet between you and her. I thought you would have good things to say about the doubles. Thank you for being here.
Sure.
I was just actually just thinking, Grant, because I remember you mentioning one time like the pace of philosophy is, so long, like a philosophy mid-review might be like, every 20 years or something.
Right. You guys are under pressure to innovate in a way that philosophers are not.
Right. And we thought architecture was a geological pace.
Oh no, not compared to philosophy.
I think Steve in this group of people could tell you that architecture can go very, very fast.
Yes.
When I talk to him, it's like always working 24 hours. Somehow I can lose.
We're still basically doing Kant and philosophy, and that's the 1780s.
Okay, great. All right, everyone. Thanks. Good luck.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Blake and Andrew, if you want to stick around. All right, guys. So I think there was some good feedback. Yeah, 4 weeks. That just hit me that there's 4 weeks left because the mid review was so pushed back. So yeah, I would say, well, for Blake, I think Stephen's right. You know, just like haul ass developing this thing.
Yeah.
You know, the next, because I think you're going to do all digital, right? Like no model. So, which that should save you some time. But I think like really thinking about also the presentation, like is it renderings and drawings? Are there animations, video, you know?
Yeah, I think animations will definitely help.
Yeah. So I think just like busting out hardcore the next week and develop, and I know you can do it. I know that if you like spend the time on it, I know you can work fast. But you gotta like, I know you're probably like burnt out on everything, but
yeah.
I know. But it's almost there. So I think, and like Stephen said, like it's potentially it's a really strong project, really strong thesis. So yeah, I would spend the next week just developing hardcore, like program, working out the interior, where things go, the surfaces, you need more access on top to be able to populate and activate the surface. And then on the vegetation, I think, I'm not sure about like the strategy of loosely deploying like trees and things like that. Like I'm thinking, my sense it should be a little bit more curated, like specifically curated to like zones or something like that, as opposed, because I don't think it reads so clearly that, oh, these are trees that don't really belong with what this terrain suggests. And I don't know exactly what that means, but there were more like patches, like maybe not an even distribution, but more dense patches of certain vegetation, trees types. So there wouldn't just be trees everywhere, yeah, and then and I think he's right too about like the rendering technique and so. And I know you can do some amazing rendering, so I'm not really worried about that. But the project just needs more development so that those renderings pay off. And then Andrew, you gotta like jump onto the individual, like start developing one of these things hardcore. But I think otherwise everyone's gonna have that question like, great site strategy, great idea, but what's happening is how does a residential program actually work in these things,
Sure.
So that you can generate some sections.
I mean, was it just a matter of me not showing them? Because I think the presentation probably, I just didn't jump into them.
Well, you haven't really dug deep into resolving one of these, right? Like fully enclosed program, stairs, kitchen, like all that.
Yeah,
stuff.
that stuff. Sure. Because I mean, I hope they give a sensation of. I mean, I was trying to say that I'm not willy-nilly. I mean, I manipulated a lot of stuff, and they are attempt to close the project.
I know, it just because there's no section.
But typify it, yeah.
Yes,
of course.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
right.
Yeah. But I have to say, like your presentation was the best you've given so far.
Oh God, thank you.
Verbally, it was very clear.
Oh, good.
I think that's why they were able to kind of jump into it and kind of get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then Blake, yeah, your volume was just like cut up. Like I couldn't hear half of what you were saying. It's just like, it was just, you were kind of low and going in and out.
Maybe my laptop.
Ramiro. Go ahead, Blake.
My laptop might have been too far away from.
Oh, maybe. But it sounds like almost like bad reception, like on a phone kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Cell file.
My Wi-Fi goes out a lot, so it could be that too.
Maybe. What were you gonna say, Andrew?
Well, I didn't know if you picked up. I kind of broke based on what we talked about yesterday. I thought maybe what helped me out is I broke it up into chunks. Like there was like frontality, privacy.
Yeah, no, exactly. That was brilliant. That
came through. Okay,
that
good.
was great. Yes. I saw that, and that made total sense.
Oh, good. Okay, good.
That was very clear. And I think, like with Eric's question about, like the site strategy, like whether there should be less of them. And I think either you have to respond, and I'm not sure if you did respond to him, but saying like you're following the original subdivision logic, like
right,
like
just fill it up.
Yeah, or I think you either have to say like you're respecting the original subdivision logic in terms of the size of the plots, or if you take it to where he's thinking, you redefine what the plot is. Like there may be half as many plots, so you have more space, less houses. You know what I mean?
I thought it was harder to maintain or retain the property line like that. That still is your own domain. So how do you kind of?
Right. I think the issue he brought up is if you're going to make it more into the vein that you're talking about it, then maybe less houses is better, which means less plots. Like you might say, okay, if I take it to that, then 2 plots is now 1. So you reduce by half the number of houses. Or you say, I'm keeping the original subdivision. Like it's more about taking a position.
Sure. Well, do you think, I thought maybe now I'm realizing it was that if I filled up every single property, it does start to read like an urban project, that in fact, the curb appeal there's kind of still an individual. I know I didn't develop the driveways and everything in them, so that might help give like what's idiosyncratic about every site. But yeah, it just
the other one is scale. The other one is scale. Like I still think in general, like they're way oversized.
I know it.
Like I could imagine where some of them are small enough that you don't even see them because the tree canopies cover them. Like from the aerial view, like you might only see like a little sliver of
the problem was I have a tall one and a short one. I mean, they do have characteristics that are very unique to themselves. It was that I offset them to where you see the tall one behind the short one, and so it all looks tall. Because in fact, like I got to work that kind of like what is there can't be such a self-sameness to it that makes it all look tall. Yeah. Okay, good.
I think also like in developing the individual house, right? I think because to capitalize on the height that you have, like to validate why they're so big and tall, and the fact that they're embracing some of the trees and vegetation, is that you can start to say that, look, there's no more backyard, side yard, front yard. There are different sections of yard. Like yard gets folded up into exactly. Bottom yard, middle yard, top, exactly.
Right. Well, I thought that was what, that's why I showed that when the tectonics kind of get pulled apart and they almost like they're going more vertical than horizontal. And it's just like the wall almost turning vertical in order to grab space up above and below.
But I don't mean conceptually or diagrammatically anymore. I mean like literally, like, so when you cut the section, you understand like, oh, okay, I understand why these things are so big. Like they need to be this big because or this tall, because they're redistributing yard vertically.
Yeah. I mean, I just think it's clear that whenever you start to untether the typical tectonics that they do, when they start going vertical, they're not just towards, I mean, they seem to start grabbing things,
Right.
Not just that I wanted a top yard or a bottom yard.
Right. All right, guys.
Thank you.
Gonna help. today's Wednesday. Yeah. So okay, let's wait for Monday. Is that good?
Yeah, sounds great.
Okay, great.